Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nolan Buchanan. California is known for its beautiful natural attractions, particularly in El Dorado County, which borders Nevada and is close to the well-known Lake Tahoe. In this rural region lies the small town of Greenwood, home to over 1,000 residents. Tourism is one of the main economic sectors here. On the morning of Sunday, September 13, 2015, everything seemed normal until an urgent call to 911 reported a large fire in the forest area. Immediate action was necessary to prevent the fire from spreading. Firefighters quickly arrived at the scene and began extinguishing the fire, but the flames rapidly surged to heights of 33 feet. Fortunately, there was a stream nearby that helped extinguish most of the fire. The next step was to check the area to ensure that no one was injured and to assess the damage. During the survey, it was found that a small building measuring about 55 square meters had completely burned down, with only the foundation remaining. What caught the firefighters' attention was a strange smell that was later identified as the smell of burning flesh. Initially, the firefighters considered the possibility that a pet might have been trapped inside the house, but they quickly ruled this out when they found a human skull and a burnt rib cage. Sadly, it became clear that the fire had claimed someone's life. The grim discovery was promptly reported to the police, who faced a challenge. Parts of the house were still on fire, making it impossible to conduct a thorough examination. They had to wait until the fire was out and the temperature dropped. As the police stood outside observing the fire, they reached some preliminary conclusions. They determined that the house was clearly not the owner's official residence since it was situated in a remote and isolated area. Additionally, the house was very small, measuring less than 60 square meters, and it was likely a vacation home. Through their ongoing surveillance, the police suspected there might be more victims beyond the remains they had found, but they could not confirm this. To gather more insights, they decided to examine the nearby area. The total area associated with the house was 8 hectares and was owned by someone. On the property, they discovered a large trailer and an old pickup truck, which were registered to a company. They were able to check the license plates to identify the vehicle's owner, who might have been in the house during the fire. The search was quick, revealing that the truck and trailer belonged to a company called Buchanan Construction, owned by an individual named Adam Buchanan. Adam lived 250 kilometers, 155 miles, away, which is about a 3-hour drive. This information supported the police's suspicion that the house was merely a vacation retreat for those looking to escape the city. However, it remained to be determined who had been inside, Adam himself or someone else. Late on September 13th, 2 bodies were discovered in the burning building. The name of the company owner provided detectives with their first lead in the investigation. The police were tasked with checking on the well-being of all members of the Buchanan family to see if they were at home. They arrived at the family's residence and soon noticed a white Ford pickup truck in the driveway. A young man named Nolan Buchanan emerged from the house, surprised to see the uniformed officers, and asked about the reason for their visit. The police did not disclose the reason right away, wanting first to determine who else was home. Nolan announced that he was Adam's son from Adam's first marriage. He stated that his father, Adam, had gone to the country estate with his fiancée, Molly, and their 8-year-old son, Gavin, for a short vacation, and they planned to return that evening. The officers needed to identify the bodies found in the house, as they might belong to the Buchanan family members. Nolan stated that there should have been 3 people in the home, but only 2 bodies were found in the debris. To determine the identities, further examination was required, but the wreckage was still too hot for a thorough inspection. The next day, September 14th, the El Dorado County Police planned to speak with Nolan again to gather more information about the victims of the fire. The officers met with Adam's parents, who expressed their concern that their son, the owner of the burnt house, had not reached out to them. During their conversation, it became apparent that Adam, who had some experience with repairs, had been working on fixing the house. Although the building was connected to a generator, there was no electricity at the time of the incident. However, there were gas cylinders present, suggesting that the fire could have started accidentally or been set intentionally, both possibilities remained open. Afterward, the police continued to search the forest area and gathered some evidence, though it was insufficient to advance the investigation. They could only access the ruins of the burned house on September 15th. Investigators hoped that the objects discovered inside would provide crucial information for understanding the incident that occurred there. During the excavation process, they discovered a third body, which attracted a lot of attention from the investigators because there was a round hole in one of the bones. This discovery suggested that something sinister had happened within the house. Accidental death was ruled out, and the possibility of murder became the primary focus. There was a strong belief that the fire had been set to destroy evidence of the crime. However, questions remained about how the incident occurred. Was it a botched burglary, or was a dangerous killer responsible for the deaths in that area? While the victims had not yet been identified, there was a strong likelihood that they were all members of the Buchanan family. To confirm this, the remains were sent to a forensic expert for an autopsy, with instructions to identify the bodies and determine their causes of death. It was discovered that one victim had been attacked in the torso, and another victim had a bullet fragment found in their vertebra. Unfortunately, the second body was too severely charred to yield much information, but the presence of cartridges nearby strongly suggested intentional murder. The remains of a third individual, identified as a skull fragment, confirmed that the person had died from a weapon attached to the head. The medical examiner revealed that the victim was a child. Detectives verified their suspicions about the identities of the deceased, confirming they were members of the Buchanan family: Adam, Gavin, and Molly McAfee. All three of them had been attacked. The police faced a difficult challenge in informing the victims' families about their tragic fate. The families had held on to hope until the end, struggling to accept the reality of their loss, and nothing could truly prepare them for the heartbreaking news. Upon learning what happened, the relatives were left devastated and grief-stricken. Neither Molly, known for her cheerful and friendly demeanor, nor Adam, who cherished his partner, had any enemies who would wish them harm. Although Adam had experienced a difficult marriage and raised his son Nolan from that relationship, this alone seemed unlikely to lead to murder. Marriages often have their ups and downs, and many couples find themselves separated or divorced. After parting ways with his first wife, Adam continued to care for their son, Nolan, hoping that Nolan would one day take over his construction business. After overcoming his emotional pain, Adam decided to seek a new relationship with Molly through a dating website. Their first date took place at a Starbucks coffee shop. They discovered they had much in common, including Molly's experience working in a construction company. It was love at first sight. Adam wasted no time in inviting Molly to move in with him, and she happily agreed. Their life together blossomed, and for 10 years, they enjoyed a deep and fulfilling partnership. Both of them dreamed of having a child. A few years after they met, Molly became pregnant and gave birth to Gavin, who became a half-brother to Nolan, Adam's eldest son. It seemed like a perfect family picture. However, family members noticed that their relationship was not as stable as it appeared. Adam and Molly often argued. Although Molly never filed for divorce, she would occasionally take their son and stay at her parents' house for a few days. It was also revealed that Adam and Molly liked to hunt near their country home. Since both owned weapons, investigators speculated that during one of their arguments, one of them might have grabbed a weapon, leading to a tragic outcome. The investigation raised concerns. If the tragedy stemmed from a conflict between the couple, there should have been a weapon found next to one of the bodies. The police carried out a thorough search of the scene to find the weapon involved in the incident. The possibility that the weapon had been badly damaged or almost completely destroyed in the fire was considered, but the search for it continued. If the weapon had been found, it would have supported the theory that Adam and Molly were involved. If not, it would suggest that an outsider may have harmed the family. Over 5 days, forensic team members methodically sifted through the ashes of the house. Their thorough search ultimately yielded no weapons, leading to the conclusion that Adam and Molly were not the perpetrators. It was also clear that 8-year-old Gavin was innocent, indicating that a fourth person was involved in the incident. The absence of a murder weapon was troubling, as it meant the investigation had to restart from square one, without any suspects or evidence. As is customary in such cases, detectives meticulously examined the family's history and relationships. While they had already interviewed Adam's parents, they had not yet spoken with his eldest son, Nolan. It was time to ask him some questions. The 16-year-old boy, Nolan, shared that after his parents divorced, he felt very anxious but tried to stay strong. He lived with his grandparents. When asked why he didn't go on vacation with his relatives, he explained that he felt it was his responsibility to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. According to Nolan, they got into an old pickup truck and headed to Greenwood, the same truck that the police had seen near the burning building. Adam chose to use the service vehicle rather than his own because it was loaded with stones he planned to use for landscaping at his country home. The investigators asked Nolan if he was aware of any issues with his neighbors. He replied that someone was regularly growing banned substances on his family's remote property. This caught the detectives' attention, particularly because, in this part of the United States, violent crime is often associated with the cultivation of banned substances. The conversation with Nolan continued, shifting to the family business. He revealed that his father's business had been struggling lately. The company was facing significant challenges in the United States, with its employee count dwindling to just 5. Financially, the situation was critical, and the debts related to the business were quickly accumulating, according to what his father reported. Fortunately, the investigation had gathered valuable information, allowing the case to progress. On September 18, 2015, investigators began looking into a conflict that arose regarding the cultivation of illegal plants in that area. It was revealed that there was indeed a disagreement between Adam and his neighbors. He confronted them, demanding that they stop growing and harvesting the tree on his property, threatening to involve the police if they did not comply. Detectives believed that this ultimatum could potentially escalate into a desire to harm Adam's family. However, no one knew which neighbor was involved. To gather more details about the situation, the investigators decided to explore the neighborhood on foot. One of the investigators had a breakthrough when he met a man who admitted to arguing with Adam over the cultivation of an illegal crop. The argument was intense, but they managed to resolve their differences. However, Adam's business was facing a financial crisis. On September 17, police conducted a raid on Adam's company, confirming Nolan's claims about its dire situation. Debts exceeding $30,000 were putting it at risk of bankruptcy, leading to layoffs of some employees. It came to light that some of these former employees were very unhappy about being let go and might have motives related to the murder investigation. Investigators sought and obtained a warrant to access the company's premises and review its documents. The following day, September 19, local high school students participated in a community cleanup just a mile away from Adam's construction company. During the cleanup process, a student discovered a small bag hidden behind a bush, with a weapon next to it. The school management promptly informed the police, who examined the bag and found Adam's identification inside it. This led to a new theory: the victims were murdered, the weapon was found, and the killer may have taken Adam's documents in order to obstruct the investigation. The discovery was crucial, revealing that someone had traveled from Greenwood to confront the family before returning to Benicia, where they abandoned the bag and weapon. It was likely that the perpetrator was from the local area. Detectives were convinced that the culprit was one of the employees from Adam's construction company, as evidence was discovered just a mile away from the company's headquarters. The weapon and the items found in the bag were well preserved, so they were sent for examination. After obtaining a search warrant, investigators began examining the company's buildings, focusing particularly on financial records that could reveal the names of potential creditors. During the investigation, detectives discovered a surveillance camera at the company's premises, which was a welcome sign. The camera was aimed at the center of the parking lot. Knowing that the family had gone to the countryside on Friday, September 11th, the investigators decided to review the footage from that day to see if anything unusual occurred. In the video, they spotted a large trailer that had previously come to their attention near the family's burned home. The footage also showed Adam and Molly loading pallets of decorative rocks. However, a critical moment changed the course of the investigation. Although it initially seemed insignificant, the vehicle towing the trailer was not the old white pickup parked at the burnt house. It was a white Ford that had been seen in the driveway of the Buchanan home when investigators first questioned Nolan. He had falsely claimed that his relatives had left in the old pickup. With this revelation, the police became very interested in his story. Molly's mother, Susie Slankard, had a suspicion that something was off when she noticed a Ford parked near the burnt house, which was later replaced by an old car. Concerned, she called the police after a strange incident during a family dinner earlier that week. Nolan, who had been questioned about the country house, made an unusual remark, claiming he was no longer just an heir but now the owner. Although his father, Adam, had founded the company, Nolan insisted that the rights had transferred to him. Nolan explained how he planned to take control of the family business and sell its assets to prevent its downfall. It was surprising to hear such statements from someone so young, especially after losing his family. Susie, puzzled by Nolan's odd behavior, contacted the police to express her concerns. As a result, the police summoned Nolan for another interrogation. They did not charge him with any crime or demand explanations. They merely took his statement, in which he spoke vaguely about his whereabouts on the day of the murder. During the second questioning, Nolan provided more details. He claimed that he spent Saturday alone on September 12, 2015, attended church with his girlfriend and her family on Sunday morning. Later, he met friends at the shopping center and then returned to see his girlfriend. The investigators allowed him to continue without interruption but asked once how he had paid for his shopping and date expenses. Nolan said his father's bank card was at home and he used it. Following this, the police requested a search warrant for Adam's house, anticipating valuable evidence. They hoped to seize the bank card to review any transactions. The warrant was granted, and investigators rushed to Adam's house, where they found the card in the upper part of a safe. They also noticed a Ford parked in the driveway, which had dirt lodged in the wheels. It had just rained, and according to the police, the dirt on the wheels might have been washed away or at least significantly reduced. Additionally, a construction company's surveillance camera showed that Nolan had lied about the old pickup truck that the family was supposed to have left behind. The Ford was confiscated for further analysis, making Nolan the main suspect in the murder. Even though he was already under police scrutiny, gathering enough evidence to prove his involvement would be challenging, especially since he was a minor accused of murdering his family. The suspicions were confirmed when the investigation began with laboratory tests on the murder weapon, which revealed Nolan's fingerprints. This indicates that he possessed a weapon. However, further evidence is needed to prove that he went to the scene where his family was present. Detectives examined the bank transactions of Molly and Adam in the days leading up to the murder. A transaction took place on September 11th, just as the family was getting ready to go to their country house. A payment of $36 was made at a restaurant in a small town along the route to Greenwood. When investigators contacted the restaurant management, they confirmed that they had surveillance cameras. The timing of the transaction allowed detectives to establish when the family should have been at the restaurant. In the video footage, they identified the same white Ford towing a large trailer, which had been seen at the crime scene and had been searched and confiscated a few days earlier. Law enforcement officers discovered a receipt for a transaction on Friday, September 11, 2015, which raised questions about the details of the order. The receipt indicated that several sandwiches and 4 drinks had been purchased. Since the Buchanans were a group of 3, the question arose, why would they order 4 drinks? Investigators collected the bag and other trash found in the car to reconstruct the menu associated with the receipt. They also reviewed the trash discovered earlier in the investigation in front of the vacation home. Upon comparing their findings, investigators confirmed that the Ford pickup truck had indeed been in Greenwood. The next bank card transaction occurred on Saturday, September 12th, at a vending machine in a bar approximately a 30-minute drive from Greenwood. As in the first case, investigators visited the bar to review the surveillance footage. The video clearly showed Molly, as well as a woman nearby withdrawing $40 from an ATM to cover expenses. It was clear that Molly and Adam were present, as their car was visible in the footage outside the bar. This was significant because it confirmed that Adam had his bank card with him that evening, and it remained with him throughout the weekend. After determining the time Molly and Adam left the bar, detectives tracked their route. A restaurant along the way had a camera facing the highway, making it a valuable resource. Investigators reviewed the footage and verified that the Ford truck was headed toward Greenwood around 2:30 a.m. It was widely accepted that Adam and Molly were in the vehicle. However, at 3:30, the same pickup truck was noted returning. Detectives became convinced that, at that moment, Nolan was in the car, driving home after committing the act of killing his family and disposing of their bodies. On September 13th, new transactions were reviewed, including purchases at McDonald's and gas stations. The records indicated that there was no food for 4 people in the paid order. It was noted that the Ford was still parked near the burned house and was driven by Nolan. The detectives checked with the bank and confirmed that only one card had been issued in Adam's name. It was clear that this card had been used between September 11th and 13th in Greenwood. With solid evidence in hand, the detectives returned to question Nolan, who was still in high school at that time. Nolan was called out of class for questioning. He said his father had left his bank card at home and had driven to a country house in an old pickup truck, not the Ford he was driving. Faced with the evidence, he fell silent, realizing that the police had caught on to him. After a tense silence, Nolan was officially arrested for the crime committed at the Greenwood house. In November 2015, Nolan was charged with the premeditated murder of his father, Adam, his stepmother, Molly, and his younger brother, Gavin. The defense quickly appealed to a juvenile court to have the case dismissed in Nolan's favor. The legal proceedings in adult court lasted 2 years, and in 2017, they received a response to their request. The ruling confirmed that Nolan would be tried as an adult, even though he had not yet turned 18 at the time of the crimes. The hearings were highly emotional as Nolan claimed he wasn't the killer. He insisted that his father was responsible and that he was merely defending himself. This shocking statement surprised not only the police but also the families of both Adam and Molly. Nolan said he was resting at their family's Greenwood home on September 12th, while Gavin was sleeping in a bed nearby. They both suddenly woke to loud noises and screaming. At that moment, Nolan noticed a weapon aimed at Gavin, and then a shot was fired, killing his younger brother. In a state of panic, Nolan lunged for the weapon. Miraculously, he managed to push the attacker away, take control of the weapon, and attack the man twice. Only after the attack did he realize that the person he was confronting was his father. Understanding the gravity of the situation, he then poured gasoline from a car onto the house and set it ablaze to make it look like nothing had happened. He subsequently left Greenwood in the family's white Ford. However, this account was challenged by a forensic expert, who noted that a bullet impact found on a fragment of Gavin's skull indicated that a shot was fired at nearly a 90-degree angle. The prosecution concluded that Nolan, left alone at home while his parents were at a bar, waited for their return before killing both of them. Evidence suggests he killed Adam first, followed by Molly. Afterward, Nolan took his stepmother's bag and set the house on fire. On Sunday, he spent the day with his girlfriend to establish an alibi. However, the motive behind his actions remains unclear, as he has not confessed. Some speculated could be related to money. Perhaps he thought he could manage the family business better than his father. On July 13, 2018, after 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Nolan Buchanan guilty of murdering Adam, Molly, and their son Gavin. He was sentenced to 150 years in prison but will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years. The Nolan Buchanan case is a tragic and mysterious story that leaves many questions for the residents of Greenwood and the Adam and Molly families. The family had a seemingly peaceful vacation at a vacation home in the woods, but tragedy suddenly struck, taking the lives of Adam, Molly, and Gavin. Nolan, a 16-year-old boy, went from heir to murderer and was sentenced to 150 years in prison for premeditated murder. The true motive behind this brutal act remains a mystery known only to Nolan. However, he has chosen to keep it a secret, leaving behind loss and sorrow for those left behind. Thank you for following this story. Please share your thoughts and don't forget to check out the next episodes on our channel. See you again. Lindsay Shiver was born on October 8, 1986, in Alabama to Andrew Shirley and Cecilia. She has 2 brothers named Brandon and Craig. She grew up in a typical Southern environment where beauty pageants played a significant role in the community. She participated in various pageants across the state, and at 19, she won the title of Miss Houston County in Alabama and was a runner-up at the National Peanut Festival. With a crown adorned with a shiny peanut, glossy blonde hair, and bright eyes, Lindsay earned several pageant accolades. In 2006, Lindsay began her studies at Auburn University, a well-regarded institution in Alabama, pursuing a degree in elementary education with the goal of becoming a teacher. Her time at Auburn was promising. She was well-liked and had a wide circle of friends. As a cheerleader, she passionately supported the Tigers, her college football team. She enjoyed attending gym classes, where she eventually met Robert Shiver, a player for the Auburn Tigers football team. Their relationship quickly flourished, and soon they were inseparable. Robert Shiver, an aspiring athlete, gained recognition at Auburn University. Starting as a walk-on, he earned a 3-year scholarship and ultimately became the team captain, achieving significant milestones as his senior year approached. After graduating, he signed with the Atlanta Falcons as a free agent in 2010, driven by ambition and financial opportunities. That same year, Robert and Lindsay got engaged and married in 2011. To outsiders, they seemed to lead a perfect life, raising 3 beautiful sons named Grayson, Landon, and Rhett. However, reality is not as perfect as it seems. Robert's pursuit of a professional football career hit a setback when his contract with the Falcons was terminated. Rather than feeling like a failure, he found success in his business career. He now serves as the vice president of Senior Life, an insurance company, which provides him with a stable income. This change allowed Lindsay to stay home and care for their children. They enjoyed a lavish lifestyle, frequenting country clubs, dining in upscale restaurants, and traveling extensively, with the Bahamas as one of their favorite destinations. Robert's wealthy parents owned a home in Baker's Bay, Bahamas, an exclusive tropical island favored by celebrities. The area is known for its luxurious properties, serene beaches, and elite community. Robert and Lindsay often visited this paradise with their 3 sons, traveling on their private jet. These luxurious getaways are made easy by having access to a private residence in the Bahamas and shared ownership of a private jet, which allows them to travel to the island whenever they wish. With considerable financial resources, the Shivers lived a life filled with luxury and privilege. Their home in Baker's Bay was close to the residences of celebrities like Michael Jackson and Tom Brady, surrounded by an elite community known for its high-profile residents and stunning landscapes. Baker's Bay offered a retreat for those seeking privacy and exclusivity. Robert and Lindsay often took trips to Baker's Bay, enjoying the tranquility of the area surrounded by other wealthy families. They spent their days relaxing by the pool, exploring the island, and socializing with their upscale neighbors. Despite their extravagant lifestyle, they worked hard to maintain the appearance of a perfect family, presenting themselves as a loving couple enjoying their wealth and success. Despite appearing happy, Robert and Lindsay's relationship was in trouble. After 10 years of marriage, their relationship seemed to have lost its excitement. Lindsay yearned for adventure and was drawn to a 28-year-old Bahamian man named Terrence. They met at Grabber Bar and Grill, a popular spot in Baker's Bay near their vacation home. A close friend of Lindsay revealed that she felt bored and dissatisfied in her marriage. Terrence offered her the excitement she had been missing. Suspecting his wife Lindsay of infidelity, Robert took action by hiring a private investigator to track her movements in Baker's Bay. The investigator gathered compromising photos of Lindsay and Terrence together. Armed with this evidence, Robert confronted Terrence, sarcastically thanking him for looking after his wife. Frustrated and humiliated, Robert decided to end his marriage. On April 5, 2023, he filed for divorce, citing Lindsay's affair as the reason. Robert viewed the affair as the last straw. He requested that the court deny Lindsay any alimony, arguing that she was capable of supporting herself. He pointed out that she held a marketing degree from Auburn University, indicating that she could find work. Additionally, he sought primary custody of their sons and requested their home in Thomasville, Georgia, along with its furnishings and their car. However, Lindsay had her own strategy. Just a day later, on April 6th, she submitted her divorce documents to the court, alleging that Robert had physically, emotionally, and mentally abused her. She emphasized the need to protect herself and their children from his harmful behavior. In response to Robert's claims about alimony, Lindsay argued that her years as a stay-at-home mom had limited her job opportunities. She claimed to have sacrificed her career to take care of her family, so Robert was responsible for her financial obligations that she could not shoulder on her own. During their ongoing divorce, Robert accused Lindsay of having an affair with Terrence. Lindsay defended herself by stating that her relationship with Terrence began only after she and Robert had separated and that Robert had approved of it. After 10 years of marriage and 3 children, their once friendly relationship had soured completely. The divorce proceedings were marked by intense bitterness, yet they continued to live together in Thomasville, North Carolina, despite the end of their romantic and friendly ties. Their mutual hostility only escalated as the divorce progressed, making it clear there was no willingness to compromise for the sake of their sons. The animosity between them made any chance of reconciliation impossible. On July 16, 2023, Lindsay called the police to report an alleged physical confrontation. When officers arrived, they discovered a different scenario. Lindsay claimed that Robert prevented her from using their private jet to visit Terrence in the Bahamas. However, Robert insisted that Lindsay and Terrence had planned the trip to Key West while he intended to take their sons to the Bahamas. Suddenly, Lindsay changed her plans and decided to join Robert and the boys instead of going to Key West. She told Robert that she would fly to the Bahamas to see Terrence. Acting as a responsible husband and father, Robert refused to let her use the jet for that purpose, which angered her further. The police officers observed the petty nature of their argument, which set the stage for what followed. Consumed by her desire for revenge, Lindsay contacted her boyfriend Terrence through WhatsApp. In a shocking move, she sent Terrence a photo of Robert along with the message, "Kill him." 4 days later, the Grabber Bar and Grill in Bakers Bay, Bahamas was robbed. They entered the restaurant with a clear plan, cutting the power cables and disabling the generators, which stopped the security cameras from recording. This calculated act allowed them to carry out their crime without being seen. As detectives investigated the robbery, they noticed that the thieves seemed very familiar with the restaurant's layout, knowing exactly where to cut the power. This raised suspicions that the robbery might have been an inside job, possibly involving someone who worked at the restaurant. During their investigation, detectives interviewed the staff and questioned a man named Terrence. Upon reviewing his phone, they uncovered a shocking WhatsApp message from his girlfriend, Lindsay, sent 4 days earlier. In the message, she ominously wrote, "Kill him," referring to her estranged husband, Robert. What started as a robbery case quickly escalated into a more serious situation, as the Bahamian police suspected Lindsay of being involved in a plan to have Robert killed at his family's home in Bakers Bay. Worried for his safety, Robert hurried back to the United States with their 3 children. The accusation that Lindsay intended to harm her husband is deeply disturbing. If true, it would imply she was planning to have Robert killed in front of their children, a horrifying thought for any mother. However, it is important to remember that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. On July 21, Lindsay, Terrence, and another individual named Farron Newbold were arrested and taken to Nassau. They were represented by the same attorney, who pleaded not guilty on their behalf. Following the arrests, Lindsay ended up in the notorious Fox Hill prison in Nassau, known for its harsh conditions. This facility houses not only common offenders but also high-security inmates, including serial killers. Over the years, numerous reports have highlighted serious issues within the prison, such as overcrowding, infestations of maggots and rats, bedsores among inmates, and a lack of access to basic outdoor time. The absence of fundamental necessities like toilet paper has further contributed to the inhumane living conditions. Imagine being in Lindsay's position, a woman accustomed to a luxurious lifestyle. As a former beauty pageant contestant, she suddenly found herself in a grim and bleak environment. Having lived in luxury with private jets and multiple homes, the reality of using a bucket instead of a toilet must have been shocking for her. It's hard to know exactly how Lindsay felt about her situation at Fox Hill. Could she maintain her composure and adapt to her new life? Regardless of her privileged background, it's clear that adjusting to such deplorable conditions would be extremely difficult for anyone. On August 9, 2023, Lindsay was released from Fox Hill Prison after paying a $100,000 bail. Her boyfriend Terrence and another accused co-conspirator, Farron, were granted bail as well, which was set at $20,000 each. As part of her release conditions, Lindsay had to wear an ankle monitor, report to local police 3 times a week, and follow a curfew to ensure compliance with court orders. She also had to surrender her passport to the United States Embassy, which limited her travel. Furthermore, Lindsay was ordered to stay in the Bahamas until her next court appearance, scheduled for October 5, 2023. After her release, Lindsay gave an interview to the New York Post. Despite the serious nature of her situation, she mentioned that it had been very challenging for her, saying, "It's been really rough." However, she chose not to provide additional details due to the ongoing legal matters. During the hearing in October, Lindsay's lawyers asked the judge to speed up her case, hoping for a quick resolution. However, the hearing was postponed until December because the prosecution had not finished the voluntary bill of indictment. In December 2023, Lindsay pleaded with the judge to let her return to the United States to spend Christmas with her children in Alabama. Understanding the emotional impact on the family, the judge agreed but imposed strict conditions. Lindsay was required to wear an ankle monitor at all times to ensure compliance with her release terms. Additionally, she was only allowed to leave Alabama for divorce or custody hearings in Georgia. These restrictions were aimed at protecting her estranged husband, Robert, and maintaining the integrity of the legal process. Despite these limitations, the judge did allow Lindsay some freedom. She could stay in the U.S. until her trial in March 2024, which provided her with some relief. In contrast, Robert opposed Lindsay's return to the U.S. He communicated his concerns to the judge, expressing genuine worries for his safety given the serious charges against her, which were understandable. Robert's fears were heightened due to the grave nature of the allegations. On her part, Lindsay's attorneys firmly denied any wrongdoing on her part, arguing that the evidence supported her innocence. They claimed that she was a victim, wrongly accused and unfairly targeted by Robert. As the trial approached, the public eagerly anticipated the outcome of the case. In January 2024, Lindsay accused Robert of preventing her from seeing their 3 sons, which caused outrage among her family and friends. Her attorney stated that she hadn't had contact with her children since she video-called them at Christmas. To make matters worse, Lindsay's lawyers alleged that Robert had also cut her off financially, leaving her in a precarious situation with limited access to money. As the trial approached, tensions rose. Lindsay's trial was set to begin on March 6, 2024, but a surprising decision by a judge in the Bahamas postponed it until summer. Unfortunately, the trial was delayed again, now rescheduled for March 2025. While out on bail and living in the United States, Lindsay made appearances on Inside Edition and Good Morning America. These actions drew the ire of the judge in the Bahamas, who labeled them a spit in the face of justice. This blatant defiance angered the judge, who ordered Lindsay to return to the Bahamas and to Fox Hill Prison, also revoking her bond for allegedly violating her bail conditions by moving from her parents' home in Alabama without permission. Meanwhile, Robert has found comfort in his relationship with reality TV star Savannah Crisley. Savannah gained fame early in life on the reality show Crisley Knows Best, which follows her family's dynamics. In a recent interview with People magazine, Savannah spoke highly of her relationship with Robert, describing it as wonderful. Savannah's family, including her parents Todd and Julie Crisley, has faced their own legal issues, having been convicted of bank and tax fraud. On a quiet Saturday evening in West Hollywood, an awful incident occurred inside an apartment just a few blocks from the busy city streets. Despite the calmness, no unusual sounds, no loud arguments or cries for help, but behind that door, a disagreement escalated into a serious situation. When police and firefighters finally entered the apartment, they were stunned by what they found, even experienced officers. What really happened that night? Kurt Landma was born on December 24, 1979, in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the eastern part of Maricopa County. He was the youngest of two sons of Danny and Peggy Ma, a Chinese-American couple. Kirtland grew up in a loving and peaceful environment. He was a deeply cherished child, especially by his maternal grandparents, Wing Doi Jimmy and Ellen Lee. With his friendly demeanor and constant smile, he had a natural charm that endeared him to everyone, making his grandparents feel incredibly fortunate to have him as their grandson. Kirtland showed early academic potential in elementary school, but it was in high school that his passion for learning really blossomed. He was not only a talented student but also had a strong curiosity that drove him to seek knowledge beyond what was taught in classes. After regular school hours, he took advanced mathematics courses at another institution, aiming to push himself further. One day, while heading to one of these extra classes, he met a girl his age from a different school. Their brief conversation left a lasting impression. She was drawn to Kirtland's kindness and sense of humor, and he felt the same way. From that point on, they became very close. During their junior year, they both transferred to the same school in Phoenix. Soon after, she worked up the courage to confess her feelings for Kirtland, believing he was her soulmate. She shared her deep love for him, but Kirtland, although considerate, did not feel the same way. He viewed her more like a sister. This left she heartbroken, but eventually, she recognized the value of their friendship and chose to cherish it instead of dwelling on unrequited love. Meanwhile, Kirtland focused even more on his studies, which led him to excel academically and stand out among his peers. In 1997, Kirtland took a standardized school assessment test, an important exam in the U.S. used to evaluate students' reading, writing, and math skills, which is often crucial for university admissions. His score was nearly perfect, earning him the distinguished title of Presidential Scholar, an honor for the country's top students. Kirtland was dedicated to his studies, but he also believed in leading a balanced life, which led him to compete in tennis. He frequently participated in city tournaments, many hosted at local universities, highlighting his versatility and discipline. In 1998, Kirtland started a new chapter at Yale University, choosing to major in American Studies. As he adapted to campus life, he was assigned to a residential college and shared a room with a student named Michael. The two quickly became close friends. Michael was particularly impressed by Kirtland's constant kindness and selflessness. He was someone who offered help without expecting anything in return. Michael's impressions were spot on. Kirtland's calm demeanor, patience, and genuine kindness made him magnetic. He easily connected with others, not out of effort, but because it was part of his character. His fellow students at Yale quickly recognized his captivating personality, sharp intellect, and humble nature, leading them to respect and befriend him. As people got to know him better, many realized that he was a trusted confidant. Friends often turned to him for advice, and Kirtland never let them down. He showed his appreciation not through grand declarations but through thoughtful gestures. During trips to New York City, just a couple of hours away from campus, he would often return with small gifts for those he cared about. Although he and female friend no longer lived in the same city, their friendship never faded. In one of their many conversations, she asked him why he never spoke about dating women. Deep down, she believed his silence was a kind way of sparing her feelings, but she wasn't prepared for the answer Kirtland gave. In a moment of honesty, Kirtland shared a part of himself he had kept private. He simply wasn't attracted to women. He explained that he was gay. She, surprised but open-hearted, listened carefully. Although it saddened her to think that Kirtland hadn't felt safe sharing this sooner, that conversation, free of judgment and full of trust, marked a turning point. It allowed Kirtland to embrace his identity more freely. From that day forward, he confided in she about the men he was attracted to. After graduating in 2002, Kirtland pursued another dream, traveling the world. His first destination was China, where he taught English and later took part in a cultural exchange program. This experience led him to Spain, where he lived with a host family and immersed himself in a different culture. Those months abroad helped him gain clarity about his future. By 2004, Kirtland realized he wanted to become a doctor. Driven by a strong sense of purpose, he returned to Yale, this time attending its School of Medicine. He continued to excel academically, writing his medical thesis on how traditional Chinese medicine could be applied to treat HIV patients in Hong Kong. After earning his degree in 2008, Kirtland moved to Manhattan to start his emergency medicine residency. During this time, he volunteered with a team of about 40 local healthcare professionals dedicated to educating New York's LGBTQ community about the risks associated with illicit substance use and unsafe intimate relationships. Kirtland's dedication as a doctor shone through when he made an exceptional and precise diagnosis for a patient with a rare type of fish poisoning. This case was significant enough to be featured in an article in the New York Times. Outside of his medical career, Kirtland enjoyed a lively social life, attending various gatherings and events when his schedule permitted. It was during one of these social outings that he met Andre Davids. Born in 1977 and a native of New York, Andre was very close to his sister. Unlike Kirtland, who was outgoing, Andre was more introverted. At that time, Andre was undergoing medical treatment, but the details of his condition were kept private. What was known was that his treatment involved medication that could potentially interact dangerously with other substances. Despite their differing personalities, Kirtland and Andre quickly felt a strong attraction to each other. What began as a friendship soon blossomed into a romantic relationship. Even though Kirtland was open about many aspects of his life, he chose to keep his relationship with Andre private for a long time, even from his closest friends and family. By the time he completed his medical residency, he felt it was time to take a break from the pace of New York City. Longing to reconnect with his family, Kirtland returned to Arizona in July 2012. He temporarily moved in with his parents, Peggy and Danny. Grateful to be home again and the support of his loved ones, Kirtland shared his happiness on social media. Soon after, he began working at 2 hospitals in the Phoenix metropolitan area. Though miles apart, his bond with Andre remained strong. He also kept in touch with his friends in New York, often reuniting with them during visits, whether they came to Arizona or he traveled east. Eventually, Andre began accompanying him on these trips until, in 2013, he decided to move to Arizona permanently to be closer to Kirtland. That September, Kirtland posted a photo of the two of them together online, making their relationship public for the first time. The revelation surprised some friends, but they warmly welcomed Andre into their circle. They didn't just offer polite gestures, they genuinely tried to include him socially. However, from the outset, Andre seemed reluctant to connect. His jealousy toward Kirtland's friendships gradually became more noticeable over time. This possessiveness intensified, and he began asking Kirtland to avoid spending time with his friends. Kirtland, ever the optimist, remained calm. He didn't allow Andre's behavior to derail his own goals. He continued making plans with his friend, even organizing trips together. Rather than feel discouraged, Kirtland believed that a new environment might help their relationship. He dreamed of moving to a more open and accepting place for LGBT people, somewhere they could thrive as a couple. After giving it thoughtful consideration, California seemed like the perfect destination. He was excited by the idea and shared his vision with Andre, assuring him that they would embark on this new chapter together. Once they relocated, Kirtland began working at a hospital. Simultaneously, he looked forward to being more active in the LGBT community. California, with its vibrant culture and inclusivity, felt like the ideal place to do just that. True to his enthusiastic nature, the prospect energized him deeply. In February 2014, they rented an apartment in West Hollywood, a lively neighborhood known for its nightlife and diversity. Initially, only Andre moved in, as Kirtland had to make a trip to Japan. But upon returning to the US on March 24th, Kirtland sensed immediately that the change in scenery had done little to repair what was broken. The tensions between them still lingered. For the first time, he seriously contemplated ending the relationship. On the afternoon of Saturday, March 29, 2014, after a restless night for Andre, who had used banned substances and barely slept, Kirtland decided it was finally time to have the difficult conversation they had avoided for too long. Calmly, he expressed his dissatisfaction with where things were heading and admitted that he was considering dating other people. Andre, unprepared, unwilling to accept the possibility of separation, refused outright. He also rejected any suggestion of an open relationship, insisting on exclusivity. The conversation quickly escalated into an argument as tensions flared until both men reached for kitchen knives. What began as a verbal exchange devolved into a physical struggle. Kirtland, in a moment of regained clarity, attempted to de-escalate the situation, but Andre, overtaken by rage, did not stop. In a violent outburst, he seized the weapon and stabbed Kirtland repeatedly until he collapsed, lifeless. Panicked and unsure of what to do next, Andre called his sister and told her they had a serious fight, but he withheld the horrifying truth of what had just happened. Alarmed by her brother's unstable behavior and fearing he might harm himself, Andre's sister immediately contacted the police, sharing all the information she had. Officers were dispatched to the address she provided to conduct a check. However, when no one responded at the door, they eventually left the scene. As the hours passed and she remained without news, Andre's sister called the police again. This time, officers returned to the apartment, accompanied by a team of firefighters. At 4:55 p.m. on Saturday, March 29, 2014, both teams entered an apartment in West Hollywood. Inside, they found a gruesome scene. Kirtland was on the kitchen floor after a violent attack. In the bathroom, Andre was in the tub, injured and holding a knife, threatening to take his own life. Next to him were a cell phone and a bottle of pills. A police officer quickly secured the knife, while the fire department helped lift Andre out of the tub. He was taken to a nearby hospital to treat injuries on his neck and wrists. Unfortunately, paramedics confirmed that they could do nothing for Kirtland, who was officially pronounced dead by the Los Angeles County coroner just before 7 p.m. The autopsy showed the extent of Kirtland's injuries. He had suffered 40 stab wounds from various sharp kitchen tools, was disemboweled, some organs were stuffed into the mouth, and pills were stuffed into the body cavity. From the outset, Andre Davids was identified as the main suspect. At the hospital, toxicology tests revealed multiple substances in his system. When detectives spoke with Andre in his hospital room, he did not refuse to answer their questions. Instead, he confessed to the murder and recounted the events leading up to it, expressing deep remorse and a wish to end his life. On Sunday, March 30, 2014, after further investigation, Andre was arrested at the West Hollywood Sheriff's Station. He was charged with murder involving a deadly weapon and held on a $1 million bail. He was then moved to the correctional facility in Los Angeles. News of Kirtland's murder spread quickly, dominating headlines and attracting significant media attention. Just a week later, a separate violent incident in the same apartment complex injured several people, causing widespread fear among residents. Many began to reassess their safety in the area. Andre's trial started in December 2015. He faced charges of voluntary manslaughter and second-degree murder. The distinction between these charges was crucial because California law required the prosecution to prove whether the crime involved express or implied malice, which impacted the potential sentence severity. Kirtland's family advocated for the most serious charge, which could lead to life imprisonment. In contrast, the defense argued that Andre's mental state was impaired by banned substance use and prescription medications. They pointed out that Andre had no prior history of violence and claimed that the killing occurred in a moment of intense emotional distress, a common argument for reducing charges in emotionally driven crimes. The jury considered various factors, including Kirtland's stated desire to end the relationship, which may have intensified Andre's emotional turmoil. On December 17, 2015, Andre Davids was convicted of voluntary manslaughter. His sentencing hearing took place on January 21, 2016, at the Los Angeles Superior Court. A particularly emotional moment occurred when Wayland, Massachusetts, the older brother of the victim Kirtland, addressed the court. He spoke directly to Andre, conveying his deep pain and anger over the loss of his brother in such a violent manner. He expressed a wish that the memory of the crime would torment Andre for the rest of his life. In California, involuntary manslaughter carries a sentence of 3 to 11 years. The judge decided to impose the maximum sentence of 11 years, along with an additional year for the use of a deadly weapon. Kirtland's family and many others in the community were deeply troubled by the verdict, believing the sentence to be too lenient given the brutality of the crime. Some even called for a retrial to seek a harsher punishment, but the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution prohibits a second trial for the same crime. Andre's legal team appealed the 12-year sentence, seeking a reduction. The appeal was heard on November 17, 2016, by a panel of 3 judges in California's 2nd District Court of Appeal. The defense argued for a mid-range sentence of 6 years. However, the deputy district attorney described the crime scene as one of the most horrific she had ever seen, which left the judges convinced of the crime's severity. In her closing statement, the deputy district attorney highlighted Andre's danger to society. Ultimately, the judges upheld the original sentence, agreeing that the nature of the crime warranted the maximum punishment allowed by law. The tragic death of Kirtland Ma marked a profound loss for his family, friends, and the communities he touched. A gifted doctor and compassionate soul, Kirtland's journey from a cherished child in Scottsdale to a respected physician in West Hollywood was defined by kindness, intellect, and a commitment to helping others. His life, cut short by a violent act born of personal turmoil, left an indelible void. Andre David's conviction for voluntary manslaughter and 12-year sentence offered some measure of justice, but for many, it could not erase the pain of such a brutal crime. Mariana Baza, a 19-year-old physiotherapy student, studied at a private university near her hometown of Bariri. Born in 2000, she was the only child of Ayrton and Marlene Forty, a couple devoted to their daughter. Her family described her as a bright, kind, and compassionate person, always full of smiles and warm words. Her love for physiotherapy went beyond just choosing a career. It reflected her caring personality and desire to help others heal and find relief from pain. Her parents were immensely proud of her dedication. At university, she was a hardworking student who managed to balance her studies with an active social life. She made friends easily, whether at school or at the gym where she worked out regularly. Mariana had been in a 3-year relationship with her boyfriend, Jefferson Viana. At 22, Jefferson was serving in the Brazilian Navy in São Paulo. The two had met in their late teens and built a strong relationship founded on mutual respect and shared aspirations. They were a loving couple, often sending each other playful messages and celebrating life's milestones together. On the morning of September 24, 2019, Mariana and Jefferson were exchanging their usual texts. While they faced challenges like any young couple, especially the distance caused by his Navy duties, they maintained their bond through calls and messages. There were no signs of any issues between them. They were happy and planning their future together. That morning, everything in Bariri seemed normal. Around 7 a.m., the sun was just beginning to rise, and Mariana was already starting her day. She was at the gym with her friend, Heloisa Passarello, fitting in an early workout to clear her mind and stay active. The gym was a familiar place for Mariana, where she often balanced exercise with catching up with friends. By 8 a.m., the workout was over. At 8:11 a.m., Mariana walked out of the gym, with Heloisa following a few steps behind. The street outside was quiet, lined with homes and a few parked cars. Mariana, carrying her phone, appeared to be checking notifications or organizing her thoughts about the day ahead, classes, assignments, and maybe a quick text to Jefferson. She was focused, with a busy schedule ahead. As she approaches the car, the camera catches her slowing down, her head tilted slightly as if noticing something unusual. At 8:12 a.m., she stopped at the front passenger side of her Volkswagen. Her tire was completely flat, so deflated it would be impossible to drive. Heloisa lingered near the gym entrance, watching Mariana by her car. Mariana looked more annoyed than worried. Surveillance footage showed her pulling out her phone, possibly deciding who to call for help, maybe her dad, her reliable go-to for car issues, or her cousin, who lived nearby. However, she didn't make a call, at least not right away. The street wasn't empty. The footage captured a man crossing from the opposite sidewalk toward Mariana's car. He was dressed casually in jeans and a plain shirt. However, the cameras couldn't clearly capture his face due to the distance and grainy quality of the feed. He approached Mariana directly, calm and purposeful, exuding a friendly demeanor as he offered to help with her flat tire. Mariana hesitated. She was not naive and was thinking whether to drive to her father's house or call someone she felt she could trust. However, the man was persistent. He warns her that driving on a flat tire could damage the wheel, making her believe that he truly cares about her. Around 8:15 a.m., Heloisa, Mariana's friend, had to leave for work. She got on her motorcycle and rode off. Meanwhile, the man continued speaking with Mariana, his gestures becoming more animated as he attempted to convince her. By 8:28 a.m., the situation shifted. Footage from the gym's cameras showed the man pointing across the street toward a small chakra, a rural property with a house and some land. He claimed he could properly fix the tire there and persuaded Mariana to follow him. Although hesitant and cautious, Mariana eventually agreed. At 8:29 a.m., she drove her Volkswagen across the street into the chakra's yard. Once she entered, the gate closed behind her, and her car disappeared from the camera's view. That was the last time Mariana was seen alive in public. The chakra's yard, hidden by walls and the closed gate, was a blind spot, outside the coverage of the gyms and nearby cameras. The street soon returned to its normal routine, unaware of the danger unfolding just out of sight. Before disappearing, Mariana had taken a picture of the man kneeling by her car and sent it to her boyfriend, Jefferson. Their conversation was lighthearted, typical of their 3-year relationship. Mariana didn't seem fearful when she sent the photo. Instead, she laughed about the situation. Jefferson didn't sense any danger either. By noon, Jefferson tried messaging Mariana again but got no response. Her phone, usually active with notifications, was completely silent. He called her, but the call went directly to voicemail. Later, he recalled noticing that her phone appeared to have no signal, a detail that would continue to haunt him. His concern grew as the hours passed. Mariana was supposed to attend her physiotherapy classes in Bauru, a 30-mile drive from her hometown of Bariri. She had never missed a class without notifying someone beforehand. By 2 p.m., Jefferson began contacting her friends to see if anyone had heard from her, but no one had. Growing increasingly worried, he reached out to her family, including her parents, Berton and Marlene, as well as her aunts and cousins, all of whom were very close to her and maintained regular contact. The family grew equally alarmed. Her father, Ayrton, repeatedly tried calling her, but her phone remained off. By 3 p.m., the family was convinced that something was seriously wrong. They contacted the Bariri police to report Mariana missing and emphasized the urgency of the situation. The police promptly filed a missing persons report and began gathering information from her close contacts. Jefferson was interviewed first. He shared the photo and text messages Mariana had sent him that morning. The photo, time-stamped around 8:30 a.m., showed a man crouched next to Mariana's Volkswagen, working on a tire. His face was partially visible, but the angle of the photo made it difficult to identify him. Jefferson told the police that everything had seemed normal. Mariana hadn't appeared uncomfortable, and the man looked like a helpful passerby. The police considered the photo an important lead, but more information was needed. They asked Jefferson if Mariana had any enemies or recent conflicts. He insisted that she was well-liked and had no issues in her personal life, adding that their relationship was happy and stable. His alibi was verified, as he was in Sao Paulo fulfilling his naval duties at the time. His colleagues confirmed his whereabouts. Investigators then spoke to one of Mariana's gym friends, Heloisa, who had been with her earlier that morning. Heloisa confirmed the timeline of the incident. Mariana had finished her workout around 8 a.m., and they chatted briefly before stepping outside together. It was then that Mariana noticed the flat tire on her car. A man approached and offered to help her. Heloisa did not recognize the man, but she described him as friendly and non-threatening in appearance. She recalled that Mariana was hesitant at first but eventually let him assist after he pointed out that driving on the flat tire could damage the wheel. She left around 8:15 a.m., assuming everything was fine. Later, when speaking to the police, she expressed deep guilt, wishing she had stayed with Mariana longer. Heloisa's description of the man was vague: average height, casual clothes. However, it matched the person in the photo Mariana had sent to Jefferson. When police asked Heloisa for more information, asking if she had noticed anyone else in the area or anything suspicious, she mentioned only a few people exercising and passers-by, but did not see anything unusual. The busy morning traffic made spotting anything unusual difficult. The police reviewed the gym's CCTV footage, which showed Mariana driving into a nearby property, referred to as the Chakra, at 8:29 a.m. They visited the location, which was owned by a local resident who had hired a handyman, Rodrigo Pereira Alves, to paint it. The owner confirmed that Rodrigo had been there that morning but said he had since disappeared. The officers inspected the area but found no signs of Mariana or her car. However, another surveillance tape revealed her Volkswagen being driven away an hour later. The footage showed the driver stepping out briefly, and their clothing made it clear the driver was not Mariana. The photo Mariana had sent to Jefferson became critical evidence. Police have secretly launched an investigation into the man in the photo without releasing his identity to avoid exposure. They discovered he had a criminal history, including serious offenses, which raised suspicions. The flat tire, possibly deliberately slashed, suggested a premeditated plan rather than a random event. The police initiated covert surveillance near the suspect's last known location while tracking Mariana's phone. Its last signal came from the gym's area and went offline around 8:36 a.m., likely turned off or destroyed. Knowing her car had been driven away, officers issued an alert to neighboring towns with details about the Volkswagen and the man in the photo, now their primary suspect. The car was last seen heading west toward Itapolis. In response, authorities expanded the search operation, deploying reinforcements, including a helicopter and additional officers. By 5 p.m., word had already spread quickly throughout Bariri. Everyone was talking animatedly, texting, and trying to piece together the details of the event. They were tracking a car and following clues from a photo. Soon, a name surfaced: Rodrigo Pereira Alves. He was a career criminal with a long history of offenses, including robbery, kidnapping, extortion, and attempted robbery. He had served 12 years in prison and had been released just 30 days before Mariana's kidnapping. The photo Mariana had sent matched him, as did footage from nearby CCTV cameras. As the evening progressed, the search intensified. By 8 p.m., the effort was relentless, with helicopters in the air and patrol teams on the ground. At around 9 p.m., the search team located the Volkswagen abandoned in Itapolis, near a sugarcane plantation. The car was immediately secured, and forensic investigators began their work. The vehicle was found with its doors unlocked, keys missing, and interior in disarray. Evidence showed a violent struggle had taken place, with scratches on the dashboard, torn seatbelts, and severe damage to the interior of the car. Under the seat, police found a knife, though it wasn't believed to have been used in the crime. There was no blood, but the evidence made it clear something serious had taken place. After discovering the car, authorities intensified their pursuit of Rodrigo. He had grown up in a troubled home, dropped out of school early, and turned to crime as a teenager. Known as a loner, he worked sporadic jobs in construction and mechanics but had no stable employment. Few people in the community were even aware he was out of prison, as his return had gone unnoticed. Using cell phone tracking, the police discovered that he was hiding at a relative's house. Officers surrounded the area, but Rodrigo, realizing he was trapped, attempted to escape by climbing onto a nearby rooftop. After a tense standoff, he was captured. Disheveled and gaunt, he initially resisted and denied involvement, but the evidence against him, including Mariana's photo, surveillance footage, and tire tracks, was overwhelming. Eventually, he provided information on where Mariana could be found. The search for Mariana led investigators back to the sugarcane plantation where the car had been abandoned. Late the next morning, they made a devastating discovery. Mariana's body was found hidden about a mile from the car, concealed among the dense sugarcane stalks. She was gagged, blindfolded, and her hands were tied behind her back. The scene was heartbreaking. An autopsy performed revealed that her cause of death was strangulation. Her injuries were severe, bruises on her arms and legs, scratches on her face, and broken fingernails, all indicating she had fought desperately against her attacker. The autopsy also investigated the possibility of abuse, though the results remain inconclusive, as further testing was required. No stab wounds or gunshot injuries were found, ruling out the knife discovered in the car as a weapon. The coroner estimated that she had died within hours of her disappearance, likely between 8 a.m. and noon on September 24th. The presence of the bindings and gag indicated that she had been restrained before her death, suggesting a deliberate and brutal act. Rodrigo was charged with kidnapping, abuse, robbery, and murder as prosecutors built their case using physical evidence and his prior criminal record. The prosecution argued that he had used the pretense of offering help to gain Mariana's trust, overpowering her in the yard of the property. Investigators noted a clear pattern of impulsive and predatory behavior, consistent with his criminal past. But why was Rodrigo even in Bariri? It turned out he had obtained the job through a friend, claiming that it was part of a fresh start. Rodrigo admitted to luring Mariana to the chakra, stating that the incident happened on a whim. He claimed to have hitched a ride with her car after fixing her tire, then took her into his house and panicked when she tried to leave. However, investigators dismissed his claims of panic, labeling the act as cold and calculated. In early 2021, more than a year after Mariana was murdered on September 24, 2019, the trial of Rodrigo began at the Judicial Center near Bariri. The courtroom was filled with family, friends, locals, and media outlets, all focused on Rodrigo, a 39-year-old defendant who sat expressionless in the dock. The prosecution, led by experienced attorneys, aimed to prove that Rodrigo was a calculated predator. They presented critical evidence, including CCTV footage from the gym and a photo Mariana had sent to her boyfriend. The prosecution highlighted key points in their case. One piece of evidence was the flat tire on Mariana's car, believed to have been deliberately slashed, which, they argued, demonstrated premeditation. They painted Rodrigo as someone who targeted Mariana, manipulated her trust, and meticulously planned her abduction and murder. His criminal history became a focal point: 12 years in prison for kidnapping and attempted murder, having only recently been released before the crime occurred. The autopsy report was damning, describing strangulation, bruises, and defensive wounds that all suggested a violent struggle. The prosecution argued that Mariana was likely strangled with her own shirt during the attack. The defense faced a challenging case and employed strategies to cast doubt and downplay the prosecution's arguments. They highlighted gaps in the forensic evidence, emphasizing the absence of blood or DNA to conclusively prove abuse. They also claimed the knife found in the car could belong to anyone. Despite their efforts, it was clear the odds were against them. Mariana's family, including her parents, Ayrton and Marlene, as well as other relatives, attended all of the court proceedings, their grief evident on their faces. The prosecution called them as witnesses to testify about Mariana's character, portraying her vibrancy and the profound loss her death had caused. Marlene, her mother, described her daughter as their everything, highlighting that she was always smiling and always helping others. Jefferson, Mariana's boyfriend, also testified, tearfully recalling their last messages and the haunting photo she had sent him. He confessed emotionally to the court that he would never forgive himself for not realizing that she was in danger. The prosecution used the testimony to emphasize the manipulation and betrayal of trust that Rodrigo had committed against Mariana, a point that the jury had to consider. Another surveillance video captured Rodrigo leaning against Mariana's car before she left the gym, further supporting the claim that he had intentionally sabotaged her vehicle to trap her. Rodrigo's defense team did not contest his presence at the crime scene, that was undeniable. Instead, they focused on portraying him as mentally unstable, arguing that his 12 years in prison had left him impulsive and erratic, rather than a calculated killer. They did not deny the crime itself but tried to reduce its severity, aiming for a conviction of manslaughter rather than femicide to lessen his sentence. In March 2021, the court delivered its verdict. Rodrigo Pereira Alves was sentenced to 40 years, 10 months, and 18 days in prison. But the story didn't end there. Mariana's mother, Marlene, who had become a vocal advocate for preserving her daughter's memory, passed away in February 2022 at the age of 51. On September 23, 2024, just one day before the 5th anniversary of Mariana's murder, Rodrigo died from an unspecified illness in the intensive care unit of Botacata Hospital. While it was reported that he suffered from a chronic disease, details of his exact cause of death were not disclosed by the prison or the hospital.
On the morning of July 4, 2011, the body of a woman was found 5 miles outside of Wayland, Massachusetts. A cyclist, who was enjoying the scenery near a swampy area, noticed something unusual and decided to investigate. To her shock, she discovered the lifeless body of a young girl lying in the grass and mud. It was clear that the girl had not drowned. Instead, she had suffered a brutal fate. There was a noticeable wound on her neck, and a bungee cord was entangled in her hair. The bystander, however, still in shock, called emergency services to report what she witnessed. When law enforcement arrived, they pulled the body out of the water and examined it before sending it for forensic analysis. Since the girl had only been in the water for a short time, her appearance had not changed much. Officers identified her as 18-year-old Lauren Astley, who had been reported missing the night before. Lauren did not come home or attend a meeting with her friends. CCTV footage showed her entering the shopping center, where she worked as a sales clerk at Tenna Mountain on July 3rd and leaving at 6:51 p.m. after her shift ended. At that time, she was on the phone with someone. Sadly, this was the last confirmed sighting of her, and she has not been heard from since. Malcolm Astley, Lauren's father, started to feel anxious because his daughter was always punctual and reliable. If she said she would be home at a specific time, she always did. She never changed her plans without a reason, and usually, she would inform him if she was going to be late. Understanding that something might have gone wrong, Malcolm quickly alerted the police about her disappearance. The police quickly began the search for Lauren. At the same time, her family and friends joined in to look for her. News of her disappearance spread rapidly through word of mouth among their acquaintances. Eventually, her car was discovered in a local beach parking lot. The windows were down, and her personal belongings, including a purse and a laptop, were left inside the car. However, Lauren was still missing, and it was uncertain where she might have gone after abandoning her vehicle in that condition. When Malcolm learned that his daughter's car had been found, he quickly drove to the location to search for her. He walked along the shoreline, using a flashlight to scan the water as if he might find her there. Soon after, Lauren's friends arrived, choosing to stay overnight at the site in hopes of being the first to see her. They spent the entire night searching the area, wondering where Lauren could have gone. It was hard for them to believe that the person they had been talking and laughing with just moments ago could simply vanish. Tragically, just 12 hours later, Lauren's body was discovered. The first person the officers contacted was her father. They shared the devastating news with him and asked him to come for identification. Malcolm struggled to accept that the girl on the pathologist's table was his daughter. However, once he composed himself, he officially recognized her. Before him lay his young and vibrant daughter, who had so much potential ahead of her. Heartbroken, he faced the painful reality and knew he had two important tasks: to inform his ex-wife about the tragedy and to find the person responsible for his daughter's death. When the devastating news reached the city, people were in disbelief. Friends and family collectively asserted that Lauren had no enemies or anyone who wished her harm. The only person that some began to suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Nathaniel Fujita. His name was mentioned cautiously, as everyone recognized his deep love for Lauren and believed he could never harm her. Nevertheless, the investigations proceeded. Lauren and Nathaniel were the envy of their entire high school. She was a petite, pretty brown girl who stood out for her energy and uniqueness, and he was a tall, ambitious soccer player adored by many girls. Although the two had known each other since childhood, they revealed their feelings later on. Their relationship began in high school and lasted 3 years. It was a colorful romance with all the typical ups and downs. They fought and made up, broke up and got back together. Both had strong personalities, but they tried to cherish the bond that existed between them. At least, this was true for the first few years of their relationship. Lauren Astley was born in 1993 in Boston. She was the only child of Mary and Malcolm, which meant that both parents focused all their attention on her. Since they both worked as teachers, they instilled important values in her from an early age, the most significant being their desire for their daughter to grow up to be a good person. When Lauren was 6 years old, her parents divorced. However, this did not affect her upbringing. Both continued to care for her and support her in all their endeavors. Lauren was a remarkable young woman, constantly engaged in various activities that kept her busy. She was passionate about tennis and soccer, sang in a musical group, and was a member of the Youth Symphony Orchestra. Additionally, she took part in her church choir, worked as a counselor at a children's camp. No school or town concert was complete without her involvement, and many were amazed by her irrepressible energy. She was active, everywhere at once. Another aspect of Lauren's hobbies was her social activism. At the age of 12, she helped the victims of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, Louisiana, and returned to the area 2 more times for similar missions. With her big, kind heart, open to the world and people, she cared for others more than she cared for herself. Those around her knew they could rely on her anytime for help or advice. Nathaniel attended high school with Lauren. He was a standout player on the school soccer team and showed great potential, dreaming of a future in sports. He was known as a diligent student in the life of the party, the eldest son of Beth and Toma Fujita. His family enjoyed prosperity and some fame in certain circles. His father was a renowned guitarist and a professor at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and was known for his unconventional approach to life. Interestingly, Nathaniel and Lauren developed a romantic relationship after she interviewed Nathaniel's father for a school project. After that, she began visiting their home more often, and once they stopped hiding their feelings, their parents began to communicate, visit each other. In the beginning, the first 2 years of Nathaniel and Lauren's relationship were wonderful. They were both attractive, and their bond attracted a lot of attention. They enjoyed many activities together, going out, playing sports, studying, and more. However, over time, their closeness started to become overwhelming. Nathaniel grew more controlling, refusing to let Lauren go out by herself and becoming jealous over small things. He often imagined threats that didn't exist and wanted all of her attention for himself, leading to frequent arguments. Despite these issues, Lauren never reported any physical abuse. Instead, their relationship turned into an emotional roller coaster. Losing its sense of peace, this instability was uncomfortable for them both. Yet they struggled to regain the happy feelings they once had. As Lauren neared the end of her schooling, she started to consider her future. She made a list of the strengths and weaknesses of her relationship with Nathaniel and realized it was time to part ways. His behavior around her had changed, and her mother had unintentionally influenced her perception of their relationship, projecting her own ideas about a future with Nathaniel onto Lauren. Additionally, the upcoming college enrollment weighed heavily on her decision. Their paths were already separating. Lauren was applying to Elon University in North Carolina, while Nathaniel had received an invitation to play soccer at Trinity College in Connecticut. On April 1st, 2011, which was also her birthday, Lauren made a significant decision. She believed it was the right time to embrace changes and begin anew, as everyone had new relationships and activities to occupy their minds and help alleviate sadness. However, Nathaniel did not feel the same way. He experienced profound feelings of loss and loneliness. His enthusiasm for college had faded. He no longer engaged in practicing or socializing. Instead, he spent his days lying on the couch watching TV. Nathaniel slipped into a deep depression that became overwhelming for him. Everyone noticed that the once active, energetic young man had become withdrawn and depressed. He turned to alcohol and marijuana to escape his reality. It was difficult for Lauren to witness this change and to feel responsible for it. She sought advice from her friends on how to help him, but they all suggested that she should not interfere and instead give him the space to heal alone. They warned that her involvement could be seen as an attempt to fix him, which might make things worse. After graduation, Ashley's kindness and eagerness to help led to unexpected trouble. She and her friends organized a large party for about 150 people, held under a vast dome where everyone danced and had a good time. Nathaniel was among the guests, but he arrived quite drunk. When he saw Lauren dancing in the center of the dance floor, he attempted to talk to her. She politely asked him to leave her alone so he wouldn't ruin the party, explaining that they had already discussed everything before and that she didn't want to engage with him in his current state. Despite her request, he insisted on starting over the conversation. As time went on, Nathaniel's mood worsened, and he grew increasingly aggressive. Eventually, in a fit of anger, he punched a pole supporting the structure, causing it to shake and collapse, which ruined the celebration. The crowd was upset, wanted Nathaniel to leave the party. Later, Lauren approached her mother, crying and revealing that her ex-boyfriend would not leave her alone and was following her everywhere. She explained that at the graduation event, he prevented anyone from dancing with her and acted very badly. He was upset that she was happy without him. When the police learned that Lauren was missing, they immediately began questioning everyone close to her. All evidence pointed to Nathaniel, as he seemed to be the only one with a motive to hurt her. However, his friends all insisted that he was innocent. The officers had encountered previous cases where crimes were committed by unexpected individuals. Nathaniel and his mother met the detectives at their front door. During the discussion, Nathaniel appeared confused and upset about the sudden disappearance of someone he cared about. He shared that he had seen her recently around 7 p.m. when she stopped to talk to him in her car. Their conversation was pleasant but short, lasting no more than 5 minutes. He claimed that he was at home when Lauren disappeared and did not leave, but his alibi was hard to confirm since he was alone. His mother supported his story, mentioning that she had also seen Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend that day when Lauren visited the mall where she worked part-time. The mother was concerned about Nathaniel's well-being, which is why she had asked Lauren to speak with him. Nathaniel's parents had already consulted a psychiatrist, but the therapy sessions were unhelpful. Their son had become completely apathetic, merely going through the motions of life. His mother hoped that Lauren's words would inspire him or at least help him regain some pride so he could move forward. This request made things more complicated for Lauren, but the meeting was supposed to be brief, and so it remained under the radar. After her meeting with Nathaniel's mother, Lauren had a phone conversation with Nathaniel, which was captured by the mall's security cameras. Concerned about her ex-boyfriend, she reached out to him and made plans to meet at 7:05 p.m. Lauren arrived at Fujita House and texted, "Here." The information Nathaniel and Beth provided was indeed valuable to the police. However, it was unclear where Lauren had gone afterward and why her car was left unlocked at the beach. The case became clearer when Lauren Astley's body was found. The detectives decided to visit Nathaniel again. However, he was not home this time. They didn't need him there, as they had a search warrant to gather evidence to support their theory about his possible involvement in the murder. Their examination began in the garage, where the specialists quickly noticed signs of a violent incident. Bloodstains were found on the floor, and several elastic cords hanging prominently on the wall matched those tangled in the victim's hair. Additional traces of blood were found throughout the house, including faint splatters on the doorknob, kitchen floor, kitchen sink, and bathroom sink. It was clear someone had attempted to clean up the mess, but did so hastily and poorly. In the basement, detectives discovered a black gym bag containing wet and muddy tennis shoes. In Nathaniel's bedroom, they found a hidden stash with a pair of bloody shoes and wet, bloody clothes. The mud on the shoes appeared to match the mud from the swamp where Lauren's body was found, but samples would need to be sent to a lab for official analysis. Experts later confirmed the detectives' suspicions, revealing that the blood found in Fujita House belonged to Lauren Astley. They gathered compelling evidence linking Nathaniel to his ex-girlfriend's murder, but his location remained unknown, leading to him being declared a wanted person. The investigation advanced rapidly, and just a few hours later, the suspect was located. He had been staying with a cousin in a nearby town. On the morning of July 5th, 2011, Nathaniel was arrested on suspicion of murder. He appeared detached and quiet during his arrest and did not resist. However, he also refused to cooperate with investigators. During questioning, he remained silent about the charges against him. The detectives speculated that either he couldn't justify his actions or he was afraid to reveal too much, which is why he chose not to speak. Investigators believe that Lauren visited her ex-boyfriend after meeting with his mother because she was worried about him and wanted to cheer him up. They later went to Fujita's garage, where a fight may have occurred. During this altercation, Nathaniel attacked Lauren and began to strangle her with a bungee cord. After killing her, he drove her car to the beach and disposed of the car keys in a storm drain, which were later recovered. Nathaniel then returned home, loaded Lauren's body into his car, and drove it to a swamp. He attempted to cover up the crime. Although Nathaniel had not been physically violent with Lauren before, he had shown moments of uncontrolled aggression. His actions seemed to be driven by an inability to accept the breakup and feelings of resentment. On August 23, 2011, Nathaniel faced a preliminary hearing where he was charged with first-degree felony assault and battery using a dangerous weapon. When asked if he would plead guilty, he quietly said no. It soon became evident that his lawyers had acted unethically and had established a questionable strategy for his defense. Consequently, the prosecutor requested that the court deny bail for the defendant, and the court approved this request. On February 13, 2013, during the trial, Nathaniel's lawyer, William Sullivan, argued that his client was not mentally competent to stand trial due to insanity. He acknowledged that a murder had occurred, but emphasized that on the evening of July 3, 2011, Nathaniel had a severe episode of clinical depression that led to a psychotic breakdown. This episode impaired his ability to understand his actions during the attack on Lauren. Nathaniel's friends supported the defense's case by describing noticeable changes in his behavior, indicating that he had stopped socializing and lost interest in activities he once loved, like soccer, which he had even practiced despite being sick. Following his breakup with Lauren, it appeared that he transformed dramatically overnight. The psychiatrist who treated Nathaniel also testified at the court hearing. He diagnosed Nathaniel and recommended medication and therapy, but Nathaniel refused both. During the trial, it was proposed that the defendant's mental health issues might have originated from his painful breakup, but were mainly caused by his multiple head injuries from sports. The breakup worsened his condition and led to a severe episode. However, the prosecution disagreed with the defense's claims. Prosecutor Lisa McGovern argued that the defendant was aware of his actions, acted deliberately, and committed the crime for selfish reasons. Nathaniel was found to have been continuously stalking Lauren, causing her distress. On that particular day, just a few hours before her work ended, he showed up at the shopping center and watched her, as confirmed by CCTV footage. Lauren's situation, which arose at his mother's request, gave Nathaniel the chance to act on his criminal intentions. Witness testimonies supported the prosecution's case, and Nathaniel showed no remorse for his actions. An eyewitness saw Nathaniel returning home on the night of the incident with music playing in his car. A cousin also provided damaging information about him. She recalled that on the evening of July 3rd, her brother had called her to hang out, but she was busy and declined. He became very upset, expressing a desire to distract himself, but it seemed that didn't help. The following day, after news of Lauren's death broke, she reached out to him to ask if he was aware of it. He responded that no one would ever find out the truth about her death or the location of the murder weapon. He also acknowledged that he had driven his ex-girlfriend's car to the town beach. Recognizing that Nathaniel was implicated in the situation, his sister urged him to confess. In 2009, after Nathaniel and Lauren break up, an interesting incident occurred. Lauren went to a disco with friends, where a guy showed interest in her. Following the breakup, she decided to give this new guy a chance. However, Nathaniel, her ex, witnessed this and violently confronted the new man, threatening to harm him if he got close to Lauren again. Nathan's jealousy was evident. When he drank alcohol, he became unpredictable and dangerous. This situation revealed Nathaniel's violent tendencies and suggested that he could be a suspect. Additionally, new disturbing details emerged. Lauren's body showed wounds that had been inflicted prior to her death, including evident defensive wounds, which suggested that she had attempted to fight back. A forensic psychiatrist brought in by the prosecution evaluated the defendant's mental state. Unlike the earlier assessment, he concluded that Nathaniel was of sound mind and capable of making rational decisions at the time of the crime. The intense conflict between the prosecution and the defense hinged on whether Nathaniel would be deemed insane. If found insane, his punishment would be significantly less severe. While this wouldn't eliminate the charges against him, it would greatly reduce his level of responsibility. The trial was emotionally charged, as family members from both sides attended. Previously friends, they were now each suffering in their own way. Nathaniel's parents were in tears throughout the trial, struggling to comprehend what had occurred and feeling overwhelming guilt for their son. The burden of his actions weighed heavily on his loved ones. Mary and Malcolm were devastated by the loss of their only daughter. Meanwhile, Lauren was enduring unimaginable pain caused by the man she loved. Experts determined that she lived for several minutes after the rope around her neck was tightened. Lauren's mother desperately sought to understand why this tragedy happened to her daughter and how long it had been in the making. On March 7, 2013, after a 3-week trial, Nathaniel Fujita was found guilty on all counts. The jury took just 1 day to reach their final decision. The 20-year-old received a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. Following the verdict, Lauren's father approached Nathaniel's parents and embraced them, showcasing his strong character and compassion. Both families had experienced a profound loss. In response, Mary and Malcolm Astley founded the Lauren Dunn Astley Memorial Fund to educate teenagers about healthy relationships. They believe that Nathaniel's crime could have been avoided. Lauren's family is now committed to raising awareness about preventing relationship violence and coping with breakups. In 2024, the State Superior Court ended mandatory life sentences without parole for offenders under 20 at the time of their crime. As a result, Nathaniel now has a chance for freedom, although no hearing has been confirmed as of June 2025. In March 2025, Nathaniel Fujita requested a retrial in the Superior Court, with prosecutors responding, but the outcome has yet to be decided. Some believe that love can easily turn to hate. Obsessive love, mixed with jealousy and selfishness, can sometimes lead to irrational actions. The tragic experiences of the Fujita and Ashley families illustrate this point. It was a quiet night in the small town of Matapalo, Guanacaste, but inside one house, a terrible event was unfolding. A man had just assaulted his partner, while a child nearby attempted to escape. Suddenly, everything went silent. What occurred in that house? And how did the little girl manage to survive? Jessica Duran grew up in Costa Rica. From a young age, she experienced neglect, not because she lacked family, but due to a lack of proper care. Locals often saw her wandering the streets barefoot, unkempt, and hungry, frequently asking for food. She dropped out of school early and soon became involved in addiction. By age 13, she was often seen in local bars, dressed provocatively, smoking marijuana, drinking beer, and seeking clients. When she turned 20, she became pregnant for the first time. Little is known about that child, except that reports indicate the baby was taken in by the paternal grandmother. A year later, Jessica met a man at a bar. He was also using banned substance, and they began a tumultuous relationship. After 3 years, Jessica became pregnant again. However, before the baby was born, he was arrested and imprisoned for attempted homicide. Once again, the paternal grandmother took care of the baby. Despite the man being in prison, their relationship continued. During one conjugal visit, Jessica became pregnant again and gave birth to a daughter. This time, she was able to keep the child. Jessica and her daughter were homeless until an old friend offered them shelter. To support herself, Jessica returned to escort. Jessica then met Dirk Beauchamp, an American who had visited Costa Rica multiple times. He became very attached to her, and they soon moved in together. However, concerns arose when neighbors noticed that Jessica's daughter was being left alone for long periods. Eventually, the couple was evicted and moved to a new home in Matapalo. Jessica's family grew when she had 3 more children. Dirk accepted all 4 children, including Jessica's stepdaughter, and gave them his last name, Beauchamp. The community viewed him as a dedicated father, often seen walking his children to school, taking them to music lessons, and spending afternoons with them in the local plaza. However, Jessica had not changed. She continued to struggle with substance use, leading to noticeable drinking and erratic behavior that concerned neighbors. Meanwhile, the grandmother of her second child filed for child support. Jessica ignored the legal notice and was ultimately imprisoned in 2015 at El Buen Pastor, a women's prison in Costa Rica. While she was in jail, Dirk had to care for all 4 children by himself. Those who knew the family said he faced difficulties and sometimes couldn't provide even basic meals. Social workers from the National Child Welfare Agency came to evaluate the family's situation, but Dirk claimed everything was fine, likely out of fear that the authorities would take the children away. While still in prison, Jessica met a man named Michael Adrian Salmeron Silva. After she was released, she returned home not only pregnant with Michael's child, but also with him by her side. This marked the beginning of a new and tumultuous chapter in Jessica's life. She was open about her relationship with Michael, expressing how deeply in love she was with him, despite their shared struggles with addiction. Michael set up a makeshift living space next to the Beauchamp family home and moved freely between both residences, treating them as one. Even Jessica's mother disapproved of the relationship, which prompted Jessica to cut off all contact with her. Dirk, an older and naturally quiet man who avoids conflict, put up with the situation to remain near his children. He also welcomed Jessica's new baby, her daughter with Michael, into their home. However, as time passed, neighbors started to see a shift in Dirk. His previously warm and lively demeanor diminished. He looked more tired and was visibly affected, both physically and emotionally, by the unstable environment he was living in. On the morning of February 16, 2016 at 8:40 a.m., a social worker from the Costa Rican Social Security Fund arrived at the Beauchamp residence for a routine welfare check. He had visited this home many times to check on the children's health and ensure the family had basic support. However, this time felt different. The house was completely sealed and disturbingly quiet, with vultures circling overhead. Worried, he approached a nearby man who was taking care of livestock and asked if the silence was typical. The man shook his head. The children usually played outside. They moved closer to the fence, and then they heard it, a child crying inside. There were no other sounds, no voices, and no movement. Realizing the urgency of the situation, he quickly called emergency services. When the officers arrived, they heard a child's crying coming from beyond the fence. They shouted, threw stones onto the roof, and tried to get a response from inside, but no one answered. Realizing they couldn't wait any longer, they forced open the outer gate and carefully approached the house. Looking through a window, they saw a young girl crouched on the floor, her clothes dirty. They checked another window, which was swarming with flies, and noticed that her clothing was stained with blood. They used a metal bar to pry open a door, with their weapons ready, unsure if the attacker was still inside. As they moved closer to the child, they saw she had injuries on her head. All she requested was water. They surveyed the area and were horrified to find the mutilated body of an adult male nearby. It was Dirk. The officers moved further into the house. In the first bedroom, they found 2 bodies under a blood-stained sheet, Jessica and her 6-year-old daughter, both lying in a pool of blood. Disturbed, the officers stepped back and headed to the back of the house, where they heard a baby's cries. In a separate room, they discovered a 6-month-old infant lying alone on a bed. Fortunately, she seemed unharmed, even though they feared the attacker might still be inside. They continued their investigation. In the bathroom, they found the body of the oldest daughter. She was partially undressed and had multiple injuries. There was still one last room to check. Inside, there was more blood, with streaks and splatters leading to an adjacent bathroom. There, they found a boy's body. The house was silent now. No one else was there. The officers radioed their station to report the tragic scene. The little girl, who had been asking for water, finally received a drink. She attempted to sit up, but her injuries made it very difficult for her to move. First responders advised her to stay still, as they understood her injuries were likely more serious than they looked. While authorities gathered evidence and removed bodies from the Beauchamp home, the 2 young survivors of the tragic event were quickly taken to the hospital. The 4-year-old girl was in critical condition, barely conscious, and had multiple stab wounds to her chest, abdomen, arms, and head. Her 6-month-old sister was stable but severely dehydrated, having gone nearly 48 hours without food or water. Both girls were then transferred to the National Children's Hospital in San Jose for additional treatment. A year later, the police officer who responded to the scene reflected on the experience. There had been signs of trouble before. Jessica had filed a domestic violence complaint against her partner, Michael. Given the chaotic situation at home, Michael, who is 24 years old, became the main suspect in a case involving 5 murders. The bodies were found on February 16th, but forensic evidence indicated that the murders happened 2 days earlier, on the night of February 14th, Valentine's Day. Investigators quickly started to trace Michael's steps. Security footage from a store about 700 meters from his home showed that he visited 3 times that night, purchasing beer, soft drinks, cigarettes, and a phone card. Knowing that Michael could potentially escape the country, Costa Rican authorities issued an international arrest warrant the following day. Michael had a prior history of aggravated theft in Costa Rica. With an extradition request now in place, the search for him intensified. Within 48 hours, Nicaraguan authorities confirmed his arrest. While officials initially credited police efforts for the capture, Michael's father later disclosed that he was the one who turned him in. He claimed that Michael admitted to killing Jessica and the children out of jealousy while under the influence of banned substance and alcohol. Despite his father's assertions of remorse, Michael did not display any emotion in the days after his arrest. When he was presented to the media, he appeared emotionless, maintaining a cold demeanor and showing no signs of regret. Michael was detained at the prison in Nicaragua as he awaited his trial. On March 30th, a pre-trial hearing took place, attended by Costa Rican officials. The highlight of this hearing was the expected testimony from Jessica's daughter, the living witness to the massacre, who is only 4 years old. She connected through video from the Children's Hospital in Costa Rica, along with a judge and a psychologist. During her testimony, she clearly identified Michael as the person responsible for the attacks. She recounted how he first stabbed her mother, followed by Dirk, and then her siblings. She described the violent events in disturbing detail, even specifying the body parts where each family member had been injured. Throughout this, Michael remained completely still. Extradition was quickly dismissed as an option. Similar to Costa Rica, Nicaragua's constitution does not allow the extradition of its own citizens for trial in other countries. As a result, Michael's trial would happen in Nicaragua. Costa Rican officials began sending all relevant evidence, witness statements, and investigative documents to their Nicaraguan counterparts to facilitate the legal process. On April 19th, a preliminary hearing was held. The prosecutor presented the charges in distressing detail: 5 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, 1 count of aggravated abuse, and 1 count of endangering a person's safety. On the night of February 14th, the official report states that Michael entered the bedroom where Jessica was sleeping next to her 6-year-old daughter. He was armed with a kitchen knife and stabbed Jessica twice, once in the collarbone and once in the chest. As Jessica fell, the girl tried to help her mother but was attacked by Michael, who stabbed her 5 times in the back. Michael then turned his focus to Dirk, hearing the screams. Dirk grabbed a second kitchen knife to protect his family. However, he could not compete with Michael, who was younger, stronger, and fueled by something evil. Dirk initially sustained minor injuries, but then Michael struck with deadly accuracy. He stabbed Dirk in the left arm, made deep cuts to his neck and side of his head, and delivered 8 brutal blows to his back, another 8 to his chest. In total, Dirk suffered 19 stab wounds that led to his death. Michael's violent rampage turned into a horrific nightmare. He targeted 8-year-old Jessica's son, who tried to escape to his bedroom but was cornered. In a desperate attempt to protect himself, the boy was slashed on the hand. Though he made it to the bathroom, Michael continued to attack, stabbing him 3 times in the back, 7 times in the chest, hitting his lungs and heart. Next, he turned his attention to 12-year-old another girl, who was hiding in a locked room. Michael broke in and stabbed her 3 times in the back before abusing her. The brutality escalated as he struck her 9 times in the head and 5 times in the chest. Afterward, he dragged her body to the bathroom, placed it in the shower, and attempted to wash away the blood. The violence persisted. 4-year-old the girl was hiding behind a door in another room. When Michael discovered her, he pulled her by the hair and slammed her against the wall. Then he used a knife, cutting her head, neck, body, and arms. The child lost consciousness, and Michael thought she was dead. He only spared one child, 6-month-old. The baby has been his biological daughter, which could explain why she was not harmed. As the prosecutors recounted the events in court, the atmosphere was filled with disbelief and sorrow. Everyone, except for Michael, listened intently to the horrific details, while Michael remained expressionless. In the meantime, the bodies of Jessica and her children were returned to her family, with Jessica's mother taking responsibility for their burial. Since U.S. authorities could not find any relatives for Dirk, he was buried next to Jessica and her children, with her family's permission. The 4-year-old girl faced a challenging path to recovery. A stab wound to her skull had left her partially paralyzed on the left side of her body. She was hospitalized for 3 months, and doctors were hopeful about her physical recovery. However, the emotional scars ran much deeper. She had witnessed her family's brutal murder, endured her own vicious attack, and spent 2 days at the scene before being rescued. The hospital staff affectionately called her the Little Champion as she gradually began to regain her smile and mobility. Like her younger sister, she was placed in a caring, temporary home. Authorities began looking into adoption options, considering keeping the sisters together. Jessica's mother sought custody of the girls, but ultimately, in 2018, Costa Rica's Child Welfare Agency decided that separate adoptions would be in the girls' best interests. They concluded that none of Jessica's family members were equipped to address the girls' complex emotional needs. Given Jessica's own difficult upbringing, officials believed they were making the safest choice for their future. The girls' former home, where the massacre occurred, became a grim landmark. It stood silently, serving as a painful reminder of the tragedy. Locals shared stories of strange occurrences there, including sightings of the family's spirits near the site. Meanwhile, legal proceedings for Michael were moving forward. On June 10, 2016, a special hearing took place where he admitted to the killings. His defense team requested lighter sentences in exchange for his confession, but prosecutors sought the maximum penalties: 25 years for Jessica's femicide, 30 years for Dirk's murder, 15 years for the girl's abuse, plus 30 years for her murder, 30 years for the boy's murder, 30 years for the girl's murder, 20 years for the attempted murder of the girl, and 3 years for abandoning infant. In total, they requested a sentence of 183 years. On July 16, 2017, more than a year after the tragic massacre, justice was served when Nicaraguan judge sentenced Michael Adrian Salmeron Silva to 183 years in prison, meeting the prosecution's request. For the first time, Michael reacted by bowing his head and tapping his fingers on the table, likely contemplating the lengthy prison term ahead. However, under Nicaraguan law, the maximum prison sentence is 30 years, which means Michael could be released at the age of 55 unless laws change. The town of Matapalo will always remember the children who once filled their plaza with laughter, music, and kindness. Dirk, the American father, sacrificed everything to protect the children he loved and died alongside them. Following the tragedy, a debate emerged over who was responsible. Was it solely Michael, the decisions made by Jessica, the impact of banned substance and alcohol, or a broader cycle of neglect and violence that spiraled out of control? A young woman was on her way home after spending a night out with friends, but she never arrived. Jessica Lynn Callagher was born on May 8, 1982 in Austin, Texas, where she lived with her parents and 2 brothers. Jessica was warm, friendly, and easily made friends. Beyond her sociable nature, she was very ambitious, had a clear goal since high school. She wanted to become a teacher. To achieve this, she enrolled at Texas State University and earned her bachelor's degree in science. Jessica then decided to pursue a master's degree while working as a teaching assistant at an elementary school and taking a part-time job at a grocery store. Despite her busy schedule, she maintained a positive attitude, believing that her hard work would eventually lead to success. On September 7, 2009, Jessica had a day off. She spent it with her friends and cousin, Melanie. They began the day by lounging at the pool and went out for dinner. Afterwards, they visited a bar to play pool. At the end of the night, Jessica became the designated driver, ensuring everyone got home safely. She dropped off Melanie last, around 1:30 in the morning. Melanie invited Jessica to stay over, but Jessica declined since she had an early shift at the grocery store and needed to stop at a 24-hour shop to buy food for her dogs. After saying goodbye to her cousin, she left. A few hours later, as morning arrived, Melanie got a call from one of Jessica's co-workers. She learned that Jessica had missed her shift, which was unusual since Jessica never skipped work without a valid reason. At that time, Jessica had been promoted to store manager, adding to her responsibilities. When worried, Melanie called Lori's several friends, but none had heard from Jessica that morning. She then contacted her brother, John Ridenour, who lived with Jessica. John told Melanie he hadn't seen her either. John, a police officer, had started his shift at 5:30 a.m. and hadn't noticed if Jessica had come home during the night. He also hadn't checked her room before leaving for work. Concerned, he quickly returned home. But Jessica was still missing. It seemed she hadn't been home at all, as her dogs were acting unusually, almost as if they hadn't been fed in a while. This raised alarm bells. Something was definitely wrong. John quickly contacted his colleagues at the police department to track Jessica's phone. The signal led them to a restaurant near her home. Melanie and her boyfriend hurried to the restaurant and soon found Jessica's car in the parking lot. However, when they approached and opened the door, they were horrified to see that Jessica was slumped in the driver's seat, unresponsive. Her skin was badly sunburned, and the inside of the car was extremely hot. Melanie's boyfriend immediately called the police, who sent officers and an ambulance to the scene. Paramedics confirmed that Jessica was dead, and her body was taken for further investigation. It was evident that she had likely been attacked. Investigators started looking into Jessica's car. They quickly noticed that the driver's seat was pushed too far back. Given the injuries she had, detectives believed she might have been attacked while still in the car. They also found that her keys, wallet, and credit cards were missing. On the back seat, there was a bag of dog food, indicating that Jessica had been in the car since the night before, as she intended to go to the store right after dropping off her cousin. After searching the car thoroughly, detectives entered the restaurant near the parking lot where Jessica's car was found. This is when the investigation took an unexpected twist. One of the restaurant employees informed the investigators that when she arrived for work early that morning, she saw Jessica's car and noticed that Jessica was still alive at that time. The witness reported that Jessica was sitting inside her car, completely undressed and behaving oddly, as if she were under the influence. Although the scene was unusual, the employee didn't dwell on it and went inside to begin her shift. Shortly after, she stepped outside again and saw Jessica sitting by her car. Jessica had put her clothes back on but was still acting strangely, just sitting there and running her hands through her hair. When the employee went outside a third time, Jessica was back in her car, talking to herself and making odd hand gestures. The police later discovered several more witnesses who had seen Jessica alive that morning. Despite her unusual behavior, no one called for help or checked on her well-being. After interviewing the witnesses, detectives returned to Melanie and asked if Jessica might have been drinking alcohol or taking banned substance. Melanie firmly stated that Jessica had been sober that night, as she was the designated driver responsible for getting everyone home safely and had work the next day. She also claimed that Jessica had never used banned substance. The situation puzzled the investigators, but they later uncovered a possible explanation. Medical examiners discovered signs of strangulation on Jessica's body, including marks from hands and a likely rope or belt. She also had numerous bruises, scratches, and she had been abuse-assaulted. Experts noted that her trauma could have resulted in a brain injury, which was worsened by the hours she spent inside a hot car in the sun. This might clarify her unusual behavior, her disorientation, and why she didn't call for help. It is likely that Jessica was so affected that she didn't understand what was happening to her, eventually leading to death. Toxicology reports confirm Melanie's earlier statement. Jessica had no alcohol or banned substance in her system. If any of the witnesses had called for medical assistance, doctors might have been able to save her, but it was now too late. Detectives needed to determine who was responsible for her death. They began by searching for CCTV footage, but unfortunately, there were no cameras in the parking lot where Jessica was found. However, they made an important discovery. If she had bought dog food late at night, it was likely that she stopped at the 24-hour Walmart across the street. The detectives obtained the store's security footage, which showed Jessica arriving, walking into the store alone, and there were no indications that anything was wrong. She went straight to the pet food aisle, picked up a large bag, and proceeded to the checkout. Everything appeared normal, but as she exited the store, detectives observed something noteworthy. Just a few seconds later, a man followed her outside. Detectives reviewed more footage and noted that the man arrived at Walmart just minutes before Jessica. He parked at the far end of the parking lot, entered the store, but instead of shopping, he went straight to the restroom and then left. When detectives checked the entrance camera, they saw him following closely behind Jessica and appearing to be in a hurry. However, there was an issue. Jessica's car was parked behind a large tree, which blocked the camera's view. Despite this, the footage allowed them to track the man's movements. He approached Jessica's car, went behind the tree, and did not emerge again. 2 minutes later, Jessica's car exited the parking lot. A surveillance camera later recorded a vehicle arriving at the restaurant parking lot where Jessica was discovered the next morning. Shortly after, an individual got out of Jessica's car and walked across the lot toward the parking area of Walmart. This individual then got into the same vehicle that a suspicious man had driven earlier. Detectives were nearly certain that this person was involved in Jessica's murder, but the quality of the surveillance footage made it difficult to identify him or his vehicle clearly. However, the detectives still had some options. With Jessica's credit cards missing, they examined her accounts for any recent transactions and discovered a lead. One of her cards had been used at a gas station approximately 20 minutes after her car was left at the restaurant. They obtained the gas station's surveillance footage and quickly recognized the red pickup truck associated with their suspect. When they checked the camera near the register, their suspicions were confirmed. It was indeed the same man. This provided proof that he had Jessica's credit card, making him appear even more guilty. The detectives then released the footage of the suspect and his vehicle to the news, seeking help from the public for any information about him. Detectives continued their search for more evidence, but found no new leads. Days went by without any significant developments until they received a call from a woman. She claimed that the man in the security footage resembled her fiancé's best friend, Crispin Harmel. She also mentioned that Crispin was expected to visit that evening to repay some money he owed, but he never arrived. After seeing the news report about Jessica's murder, she recognized him in the surveillance video. Although she was shocked to think he could be involved in such a terrible crime, she understood that she needed to inform the police. Detectives started investigating Crispin's background and soon found a significant detail. Just weeks before Jessica's murder, a patrol officer had stopped him for driving with an expired license. When the investigators examined the officer's body camera footage, they noticed that Crispin closely matched the description of their suspect. Moreover, he was wearing the same baseball cap as the person in the surveillance video. 5 days after Jessica's murder, police visited Crispin's home. They immediately noticed his pickup truck, which was the same model as the one captured on surveillance footage. However, there were some changes. The chrome details visible in the video had been painted over in black. When detectives knocked on his door, Crispin surprised them by quickly admitting that he had met Jessica that night. He explained that they connected through an adult website and arranged to meet for a casual hookup. Crispin said they met in the Walmart parking lot, where he got into Jessica's car. He claimed she drove them to a park, where they had intimate before returning to Walmart. Before parting ways, they talked in her car, during which he mentioned his financial struggles. According to him, Jessica then gave him her credit card so he could buy gas. After saying their goodbyes, they went their separate ways. The next day, after seeing news reports about Jessica's murder, Crispin panicked and feared he might be accused. He disposed of her credit card and repainted parts of his truck. Although Crispin recounted his story confidently, detectives recognized it as a lie, viewing it as a desperate attempt to evade responsibility. The surveillance footage contradicted his account. He claimed they had planned to meet in the Walmart parking lot, but he only approached Jessica after she had returned to her car. He also said she drove him back after their supposed meeting, but the footage clearly showed him walking back to his own truck alone. Jessica's car remained in the parking lot until the next morning, and no one else interacted with it. Detectives collected Crispin's phone and computer, as well as Jessica's devices, because they suspected there was no evidence of communication between them. No messages, no calls, nothing. In fact, Jessica had never visited the adult website that Crispin claimed they used to arrange their meeting. However, when investigators examined Crispin's computer, they discovered something noteworthy. Just hours after the police found Jessica's body, he searched for and read several news articles about her murder. Jessica's friends and family also doubted Crispin's story. They believed she would never seek a one-night stand or meet a stranger in a parking lot at night. That behavior was simply not in her character. Additionally, she had told a friend that she needed to rest before her morning shift and still had to feed her dogs. There was no way she would have gone out for a secret late-night date. Investigators thought that Crispin was trying to shift the blame onto others. However, the overwhelming evidence against him made it difficult for him to create a credible excuse. Based on the surveillance footage, detectives reconstructed the likely sequence of events. Crispin probably saw Jessica inside Walmart and decided to target her. He followed her to her car, got in, and used threats to prevent her from crying out or resisting. It seems he then forced her to drive to a nearby park, where he abused her. Afterward, he returned to the parking lot near Walmart, closer to his own truck. Before leaving, he strangled her and took her wallet and credit cards. When the police confronted Crispin about the incident, he stopped answering questions and requested a lawyer. Despite there being strong evidence against him, investigators faced a significant challenge that could jeopardize the entire case. Jessica had survived for several hours after the attack, which posed a major legal issue. The problem was that medical experts could not definitively explain why this occurred. Cases like hers were so rare that they had not been thoroughly studied. While the official cause of death was identified as strangulation, there had never been a documented case of someone being strangled, surviving for hours, and then dying later as a direct result of the attack. The only way to solidify the case would be a confession, but Crispin refused to admit to any wrongdoing. Detectives faced a challenging situation. They believed that Crispin was guilty of Jessica's murder, as no one else could have committed the crime. However, since Jessica had survived until the morning after the attack, there was a significant concern that the case might not hold up in court. To bolster their case, investigators examined Jessica's car for more evidence, but found nothing. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, and no other evidence linking Crispin to the crime scene. Prosecutors discovered a temporary way to proceed. They charged Crispin with evidence tampering linked to Jessica's case. Crispin had confessed to disposing of her credit card and repainting his truck, which were obvious attempts to conceal his actions. They had his own admissions as evidence. In May 2010, Crispin pleaded guilty and received a 10-year prison sentence for evidence tampering. Detectives were committed to achieving justice for Jessica and refused to give up. They needed strong scientific evidence to link Crispin to her murder. For years, their efforts led to no significant breakthroughs. Then in 2013, they found a scientific article that changed the course of the investigation. The article discussed cases in which strangulation did not immediately cause death, but instead resulted in a condition called delayed death syndrome. This syndrome can lead to brain damage, causing victims to feel confused, disoriented, and unable to seek help. The article's findings closely aligned with Jessica's behavior following the attack and reinforced the initial medical examiner's belief that she had suffered a brain injury, leaving her unaware of her situation until it was too late. Detectives contacted the author of this article right away and began constructing a murder case against Crispin, using advanced medical science as support. In May 2014, Crispin was officially arrested for murder, but he still maintained his innocence throughout the process. During the trial, his defense attorney emphasized a critical point. There was no DNA evidence linking Crispin to the crime. The prosecution contended that Jessica had fought back during the attack and likely scratched her assailant, which should have left DNA traces under her fingernails. However, forensic experts for the prosecution highlighted an important detail. Jessica had been trapped in her car for hours in extreme heat. At such high temperatures, DNA breaks down quickly, and by the time her body was examined, any genetic material under her nails would have completely degraded and been unrecoverable. Prosecutors built their case against Crispin using strong forensic evidence and extensive surveillance footage that strongly indicated his guilt. However, a complication arose when Crispin's lawyer challenged the accuracy of the timestamps on the video evidence. Initially, the footage obtained from the security cameras did not have any timestamps. Since the timing of events was critical, prosecutors applied specialized software to add timestamps later, which gave the defense a chance to question the integrity of the evidence. Crispin's attorney contended that this was a significant issue because he had not received the original footage with the timestamps included. Ultimately, the judge ruled in favor of the defense, resulting in a mistrial. Consequently, Crispin avoided conviction due to this technicality. Nevertheless, he remained in prison, serving his 10-year sentence for evidence tampering. Prosecutors quickly started preparing for a new trial. Over the next few years, Crispin's legal team worked diligently to stop the retrial, arguing that it would violate his rights. Ultimately, however, a higher court decided in favor of the prosecution, allowing the trial to proceed. The new trial began in 2018, and this time, the prosecution meticulously addressed every aspect of the case, ensuring the defense couldn't take advantage of any loopholes. They successfully convinced the jury of Crispin's guilt, resulting in his conviction for murder. Crispin Harmel received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Prosecutors opted not to seek the death penalty, believing it might jeopardize their chances of a guilty verdict. They were aware that the delayed death syndrome argument could create doubts for the jurors, and in death penalty cases, a conviction requires complete certainty. A few years later, Crispin attempted to appeal his sentence, but his request was turned down. Consequently, he is still in prison with very little chance of being released. Jessica's family expressed gratitude to the investigators and prosecutors for their unwavering commitment to seeking justice, even though it took 9 years to achieve a verdict. However, they also shared that they had hoped the sentencing would provide them with some relief and closure. But ultimately, no punishment for Crispin could ever really alleviate their suffering. A girl set out from her home to visit a friend but never arrived. Initially, the police found no clues, and the case went cold. For years, it seemed that the answer was just out of reach, and no one could solve the mystery. Decades later, everything changed when the truth emerged in an unexpected way. Claire Tiltman was born on January 14, 1977 in the small British village of Greenhithe. As an only child, she attended an all-girls school where she made many friends. From a young age, Claire was focused and determined. She aspired to be one of the first female firefighters in the country. During high school, she volunteered at charity events organized by the local fire department, offering her assistance in any way possible. However, she was also committed to earning a college degree before pursuing her dream career. In January 1993, when Claire was 16 years old, she was busy with her final exams and considering her future education. On January 18th, just 4 days after her birthday, she went to a friend's house to discuss college options and potential applications. Claire left home around 6 p.m., informing her mom that she would return in about an hour and a half. However, when that time passed, Claire still had not come back. Initially, Claire's mom suspected that she had simply lost track of time and might have stayed longer at her friend's house. However, when it was past 8 p.m., her concern grew. She called Claire's friend's house, only to learn that Claire had never arrived. Believing that plans might have changed, she began calling some of Claire's other friends, but nobody had seen her that evening. A few minutes later, Claire's mom went outside and encountered a neighbor who informed her about an incident a few miles away. The area had ambulances and numerous police cars. Feeling anxious at the time, Claire's mom went directly to the local police station to report her daughter missing. She gave them a detailed description of Claire, but instead of taking her report, the officers asked her to return home. They mentioned that there had been an incident and that someone would come by shortly to explain the situation. A short time later, police arrived at her door with devastating news that no parent ever wants to hear. Her daughter had been found dead just hours earlier. That evening, two men were driving along a road connecting nearby towns when they noticed a girl kneeling by the roadside. Concerned, they stopped to check on her. As they got closer, they realized something was seriously wrong. She was struggling to breathe and appeared to be unresponsive. One man quickly ran to a nearby pub to call for help while the other stayed with her. Initially, he thought she might have been hit by a car since she was so close to the road. He tried to comfort her, but her condition deteriorated rapidly. Within minutes, she stopped breathing entirely, and when paramedics arrived, it was already too late. Her body was taken to the medical examiner, and the findings were shocking. She had been stabbed 9 times, likely with a large knife, but there were no signs of abuse. Meanwhile, the police started investigating the crime scene and quickly identified where the attack had occurred. Claire was probably ambushed in a narrow alleyway off the main road leading to her friend's house. The nature of her injuries suggested that the attacker approached her from behind. However, there was little else to help the investigation. The alley was quiet, dark, and deserted. There were no security cameras, witnesses, or helpful evidence. One crucial detail stood out. The medical examiner noted the murder weapon was unusually large, too big to be carried casually in a pocket. Detectives suspected that the killer had brought the knife from home, indicating a premeditated plan to use it. News of the murder quickly spread through Claire's village and neighboring towns. That evening, some students were still at school studying for exams when they heard the news on the radio. Initially, the victim's identity was unknown, but it wasn't long before rumors circulated. With no strong leads in the investigation, the police sought help from the public. A few people came forward claiming to have seen a man in a light-colored coat near the road around 7 p.m. Another witness reported seeing a man with dark, curly hair leaving an alleyway, but neither individual could be identified, despite the tight-knit nature of the community. Detectives suspected that the attacker might have had a personal connection to Claire, which could explain the motive. However, they also considered a more alarming possibility that this incident could be part of a pattern, indicating that they might be dealing with a serial offender. In December 1988, 4 years before Claire was murdered, a 27-year-old woman was attacked by an unknown assailant while walking home from work. He was armed with a gun and a knife, abducted her, and drove to a remote area where he attempted to assault her. After stabbing her 5 times, he left her, believing she was dead. Miraculously, she survived. Despite her severe injuries and the freezing temperatures, she crawled to a nearby road, where a group of workers found her. She spent 9 days in intensive care, and doctors successfully saved her life. However, the police were never able to identify or capture her attacker. After Claire was murdered, detectives and local residents started to suspect that the same individual might be responsible for both crimes. A few days later, Claire's funeral took place, drawing hundreds of people from the community. Prior to the funeral, her parents spoke to reporters and mentioned that they feared the killer might attend the service. The detectives shared this concern, so they were present at the funeral and carefully noted everyone who attended. However, this effort still did not lead them to the person responsible for her murder. In the weeks that followed, the police continued to question local residents and investigate leads, but they did not find any useful information. Over 2 years passed, and it began to feel like the case would remain unsolved. Gradually, as people stopped discussing what happened to Claire, until one day, everything changed. On October 17, 1995, a local woman was returning home from work when a man attacked her just a few hundred yards from where Claire had been stabbed. The attacker used a knife. When the woman fell and screamed, he fled the scene. Fortunately, she survived despite her injuries. However, detectives faced challenges since the attacker approached her from behind, so she couldn't describe his face or any specific features. Luckily, a witness stepped forward and reported seeing a white Ford Capri nearby. This information allowed investigators to quickly identify the car's owner, a local milkman named Colin. Police remembered that they had previously spoken to Colin right after Claire's murder. He had called them to report seeing a man with dark hair near the crime scene. However, when detectives met with him a few weeks later, his story had changed slightly. Initially, Colin said he was driving on that road around 6:30 p.m., but now he insisted it was closer to 5:30 p.m. Nevertheless, he had an alibi. His mother told the police that they had been driving together and were already home when Claire was attacked. Detectives had more reasons to be suspicious of Colin. He drove a white Ford Capri, which witnesses had also spotted near another attack. Colin was known for wearing a light-colored trench coat, matching the description given by several witnesses from both crime scenes. He also had light-colored hair, and two different people reported seeing a fair-haired man near the alley where Claire was murdered. These factors led detectives to seriously consider him as a suspect and to obtain a warrant to search his home. Police discovered a large knife in the house that matched the wounds of the latest victim. However, that was just the start of their findings. They also found a hidden journal, which contained shocking revelations. In the diary, Colin confessed to attacking a woman in 1988, referring to it as his masterpiece, and claiming it had a 95% success rate. When he learned that the victim had survived, he expressed a desire to do better next time. Additionally, he mentioned an attempt to sneak into a care home to kill someone, but stated that the plan failed. Colin Ash Smith shared some unsettling experiences from his past. He revealed that he admitted to threatening his first victim, warning her that if she reported him to the police, he would harm someone else. Additionally, Colin confessed to a stabbing incident in 1995. He was angry with his girlfriend, believing she was unfaithful. In his rage, he drove around looking for someone to hurt. Initially, he saw a man but thought that would be too risky. Later, he noticed a woman walking alone, stopped his car and attacked her. Afterward, he felt a sense of relief and was indifferent about the woman's fate. The diary revealed his intentions to commit additional murders and mentioned that he had broken into the homes of several women he knew while they were away. When police examined Colin's car, they discovered blood-stained clothes and a torn piece of a tie, which he had used in an attempt to strangle his first victim. This evidence was sufficient to charge him with attacks on both women. Detectives also believed he was responsible for Claire's murder and began investigating for any possible connections. Colin's family was familiar with Claire's family. They both frequented the same community center, a social hub for residents. Remarkably, Claire had celebrated her birthday at that center just 4 days before her death, and Colin had been there the same night. Investigators also noted that Colin attended her funeral. However, despite these connections, there was no concrete evidence linking him to her murder. While Colin was in jail, detectives interrogated him, but he denied any involvement. He did present a theory, suggesting that the killer could be a man who used to play pool with Claire at the community center. Colin claimed that this man left town soon after the murder and that he last saw him at Claire's funeral. Police were able to locate the man, but he did not match any of the witness descriptions of someone seen near the crime scene. In contrast, Colin fit the descriptions perfectly, but the police still lacked sufficient evidence to charge him. Colin was ultimately charged only for the two attacks that occurred in 1988 and 1995. In December 1996, he pleaded guilty and received life sentences, with the chance of parole after 15 years. However, investigators continued their pursuit of justice for Claire, seeking any evidence that could strengthen their case against him. Among all the possible suspects, Colin remained the most likely, but there were significant challenges: a lack of physical evidence and his alibi. Colin called the police the day after the murder, claiming he saw a man with dark hair near the scene about an hour later. However, this call contradicted his own alibi because, according to his account, he would have had to be very close to the alley when Claire was attacked. This raised suspicions among detectives. Was his mother lying to protect him? Detectives continued their investigation and eventually revealed the truth. Colin's alibi was entirely fabricated. They found concrete evidence showing that his mother was not with him that evening, indicating that she had lied to protect him. In addition to this, investigators made another unsettling discovery. They learned that Colin's father had disposed of a knife that Colin had brought home after the 1995 attack. He confessed to boiling the knife, taking it apart, and throwing away the pieces just hours before police arrived with a search warrant. As a result, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. Colin's mother was also involved. She later gave an interview to a local TV station where she claimed it was her idea for her husband to dispose of the knife. She insisted that she believed her son was innocent and was afraid that the police would wrongfully accuse him of someone else's crime. Despite their extensive investigation, police still lacked sufficient evidence to charge Colin with Claire's murder. While he served time for other attacks, detectives continued to explore his background in hopes of finding a connection to the crime, but they came up empty-handed. The only notable find occurred during a routine search of his prison cell, where officers discovered disturbing notes filled with graphic fantasies about women he knew. These notes resembled pages from his old diary and painted a troubling picture of his mindset. After that, the investigation stalled. Claire's parents believed Colin was the murderer, and it weighed heavily on them that the police couldn't charge him. Sadly, Claire's mother died of cancer in 2008, and her father passed away in 2012, so neither lived to see justice for their daughter. In 2013, the case gained public attention again as detectives renewed their efforts to identify the killer. They reached out to the public for any information, and even the Prime Minister supported their appeal. Although many tips came in, none were helpful until a former cellmate of Colin's, Stephen Dubois, stepped forward with new information. He claimed that Colin had bragged about attacking a girl one day. According to him, Colin recounted seeing her at a crosswalk and described how he suddenly lost control. Detectives quickly noticed an important detail. Claire had been using a crosswalk that led directly into the alley where she was attacked. In contrast, the other two victims had been found far from any crosswalks. This clue strongly indicated that Colin might have been referring to Claire or possibly another victim that the police had not yet identified. However, detectives were skeptical about the existence of other victims since there were no similar unsolved cases reported in the area. Detectives did not have enough evidence to prove guilt yet, but they decided it was time to present all their findings and attempt to take the case to trial. Meanwhile, a new law in the UK was enacted, allowing prosecutors to introduce a suspect's previous convictions in court. This could significantly impact Claire's case. Colin was already serving a sentence for 2 violent attacks that were strikingly similar to Claire's case and occurred only a short distance from where she was killed. Additionally, investigators had testimony from Stefan and solid evidence that Colin's alibi was fabricated. With this information, prosecutors felt they had enough to proceed. On February 12, 2014, detectives announced that Colin had officially been charged with Claire's murder. This was significant timing, as it coincided with his first scheduled parole hearing. Instead of being released, he remained in jail while prosecutors prepared for trial. During the proceedings, he revealed even more unsettling information. He disclosed that he began sneaking out of his house at night when he was about 19 or 20 years old, taking a knife with him and roaming the streets, looking for someone to kill. Colin expressed that for him, it was about feeling powerful and having control over others. As he didn't want to appear weak, his ex-girlfriend testified that Colin started behaving unusually right after Claire was murdered. Initially, she thought he was just as shaken as everyone else in town, but later realized there was more going on. When asked about his feelings toward women, Colin admitted he both loved and hated them. He acknowledged that he struggled with low self-esteem and often felt worthless, which made it difficult for him to trust anyone, especially women. He also mentioned that he owned a collection of 20 to 30 knives at home, along with a crossbow and several air rifles, and his parents were aware of his collection. Additionally, Colin confessed that he never left the house without carrying a knife. When Stefan was called to testify, the prosecution faced an unexpected problem. Stefan stated that he could not clearly remember what Colin had said to him, and acknowledged that he might have mixed up the conversation with someone else. The trial lasted 5 weeks, and on December 11, 2014, the jury found Colin guilty of murdering Claire Tiltman. He received a life sentence in prison, with the chance for parole after 21 years. When the verdict was announced, Colin showed no emotion. He later appealed the decision, but the court turned it down, stating that the evidence against him was overwhelming. After 26 long years, justice was finally served. Following his conviction, detectives branded Ash Smith absolutely evil and said he should never be released. Jaswant Narwal, chief prosecutor for CPS Southeast, called the case one of the most complex that CPS Southeast has dealt with in recent years. In November 2015, Ash Smith appealed against his conviction on the grounds that Judge Sweeney was wrong to allow seriously harmful material to be put before the jury. However, the appeal was dismissed by Judge Davis and 2 other judges of appeal. He is currently being held at HMP Durham. In honor of Claire, local officials first named a road after her, and later they renamed a street using her last name. In 2022, a new community center was opened, proudly named after Claire Tiltman. Claire Tiltman's tragic murder left an indelible mark on Greenhithe, but her legacy endures through the community's unwavering pursuit of justice and the tributes that honor her vibrant spirit. After 26 years, Colin Ash Smith's conviction brought closure to a case that once seemed unsolvable, underscoring the resilience of Kent police and the impact of new legal measures. While Claire's parents did not live to see this resolution, her memory lives on in the road, street, and community center named after her, inspiring future generations to embody her determination and kindness. The case stands as a testament to the power of perseverance, ensuring that Claire's light continues to shine brightly in the hearts of those who knew her and beyond. On Valentine's Day in Tijuana, Elizabeth was excited about a second date with a man she had recently met. As usual, she let her family know where she was going, even shared her location for safety. Initially, everything seemed fine. However, her messages suddenly stopped. Her phone went quiet, and her car was missing. By the next morning, her family began searching everywhere for her, hoping to find any clue. What they uncovered shattered their hearts and revealed a more disturbing situation in the city. Elizabeth was not alone. Her case was just the start of a troubling pattern. Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa was born in 1996 in Tijuana, Baja California, a city on the border between Mexico and the United States. She was the youngest of 7 siblings. People who knew her described Elizabeth as a cheerful and gentle young woman who had a strong bond with her mother. Her mother was more than just a mother to her. She was her anchor, confidant, and main source of strength. By early 2022, Elizabeth accomplished something her family had never achieved before. She graduated with a degree in international trade and business from a private university. This was a significant milestone, but it didn't satisfy her ambitions. She aspired to pursue a master's degree to create more opportunities for herself and her family. While planning her educational journey, Elizabeth also managed a small clothing business. To boost her income, she worked as a dancer in a bar located in Zona Norte, a popular nightlife area for both tourists and locals. Like many women in her situation, Elizabeth was careful. She kept her family updated, especially when meeting clients. She shared her location, maintained communication, and trusted her instincts. This cautious habit would later play a crucial role in the effort to track her last movements. On February 14, 2022, Valentine's Day, Elizabeth seemed excited. She had lunch with her mother that afternoon, which turned out to be their last meal together. Later that evening, she had a second date with a man she had recently met at work. He was American. Elizabeth confided in her brother, expressing that while she was uncertain about him, her curiosity led her to give him another chance. Staying true to her usual habits, she promised to keep in touch, send updates, and share her location. Some reports indicate they met again at a bar, while others suggest she picked him up near a border crossing in her white SUV. They went to a Brazilian restaurant for dinner and then drove to a motel close to the beaches of Tijuana. Elizabeth informed her family that she would be gone for no more than 4 hours. At the start of the night, everything appeared normal. She kept sending her location, and her messages reassured her family about her safety. They knew where she was and who she was with. However, then the updates suddenly stopped. There were no more messages, no answered calls, and no signs that she was moving. This silence was not just worrisome, it was overwhelming. Her family's anxiety grew rapidly. The lack of communication was completely out of character for someone as careful and responsible as Elizabeth. It quickly became a clear sign that something was seriously wrong. As the hours went by, the feeling of dread intensified, marking the onset of a nightmare that no one was ready to face. When hours went by without any news of Elizabeth, her family didn't hesitate to take action. That same night, filled with fear and uncertainty, they started searching for her on their own. Their first stop was the bar where she worked, but the response they received was shocking. Elizabeth had not come in that day. Her concerned co-workers provided the family with an important lead, a detailed description of the man she was supposed to meet. They described him as overweight, with light brown skin and visible acne scars. He was a frequent customer at the bar, and although he didn't have a name, the description was detailed enough to help the family in their search. By February 15th, the family was increasingly worried due to the lack of news about Elizabeth. They decided to report her disappearance to local authorities, but encountered a common hurdle: bureaucracy. They were informed that they had to wait 24 hours before they could file an official report. Determined not to delay, they took to social media, creating pages, sharing photos, and soliciting the public's help. Despite their efforts, it felt as though Elizabeth and her white Jeep Liberty had completely disappeared. On February 16th, authorities officially expanded the report to include her missing vehicle. GPS tracking of Elizabeth's phone showed her movements, first to a Brazilian restaurant near the river, then to a motel, and finally to a park. The last recorded location was a downtown hotel in Tijuana. Her brother hurried there, but hotel staff denied him entry, and there was still no sign of Elizabeth or her Jeep. On Thursday, February 17th, her family used the vehicle's GPS history to track it to a street in Zona Norte. A sense of dread settled over them. Something was definitely wrong. Elizabeth's mother and brother drove directly to the location. Although the Jeep was there, Elizabeth was not. They called the police, and officers and firefighters arrived within minutes to secure the area. Their attention quickly turned to the trunk of the vehicle. What they discovered confirmed the worst fears of Elizabeth's family. Her lifeless body was inside, naked and curled up in a fetal position, exhibiting clear signs of violence. The heartbreaking scene devastated her family, leaving them in shock and disbelief. Elizabeth's family spoke out about her murder, the silence and inaction that preceded it. They highlighted a system that failed to respond when she went missing and the long wait for justice. The story quickly gained attention and sparked outrage throughout the city. Friends, co-workers, even strangers gathered at the scene. Elizabeth's body was taken to the forensic medical service for a complete autopsy. The findings were troubling. She had multiple blunt force injuries on her face, chest, and abdomen. A deep mark on her neck indicated an attempted strangulation. Additionally, there were signs of asphyxiation due to blockage of both her mouth and nose. Forensic experts determined that asphyxiation was the most likely cause of death. The investigation did not provide any information on possible abuse assault. Nonetheless, the case is officially categorized as a femicide, and an investigation is underway to find her murderer. The tragedy continued for the family after Elizabeth's passing. Just 3 days later, her mother suffered a sudden heart attack and died. Although the official cause was cardiac failure, many believed it was due to overwhelming grief that her body could not bear. As the family laid both mother and daughter to rest, the investigation picked up speed. Local and state authorities began to connect Elizabeth's case with others in the area. A frightening realization surfaced. This was not an isolated incident. The method of killing shared unsettling similarities with 2 other cases of young women who also worked in nightlife scene in Zona Norte. Karen, a 28-year-old mother from Veracruz, went missing on August 30th, 2021 after meeting a man at a motel. 3 days later, Her body was discovered in a local garbage dump, showing obvious signs of violence. Karen had recently started working as a dancer and escort. She was careful about her safety, only meeting clients through direct phone calls. Before she left that day, she informed both a friend and a relative about her plans. Despite their quick efforts to find her, the situation ended in tragedy. Security cameras recorded the vehicle used by the man she met, and a friend later identified him from the video. However, surprisingly, no arrest warrant was issued, and the man remained at large. Angela Carolina Acosta Flores was only 20 years old when she was found dead in a hotel room on January 24, 2022, near the bar where Elizabeth worked. Like Elizabeth and Karen, Angela had gone to meet a man described as American and possibly of Hispanic descent. Her phone was missing from the crime scene, and when investigators traced it, they found it had been taken to Riverside, California, across the border. This discovery alarmed the investigators. 3 women had been brutally murdered, all linked by time, location, and method. Each case involved a mysterious man, likely American, and all 3 women were associated with the nightlife in the same area. They were killed within a 6-month period, leading to a troubling conclusion. There may be a serial killer targeting vulnerable women in Zona Norte. On Wednesday, November 16, 2022, the Baja California State Prosecutor held a highly anticipated press conference. With a room full of reporters and the nation watching, he confirmed a troubling presence. A serial killer was active in Tijuana. The prosecutor revealed that the suspect specifically targeted exotic dancers and escort who belonged to one of the city's most at-risk groups. His method was alarming. He would travel from the United States into Mexico, commit his crimes, and then escape back across the border, making it difficult for authorities to catch him. At that time, no additional details were shared to avoid compromising the investigation or alerting the suspect. Meanwhile, the manhunt for the killer was intensifying. Nearly a month later, on December 13th, the prosecutor held a second press conference. This time, the news was shocking. They had identified a suspect, an American citizen, whose psychological profile resembled that of Ted Bundy, one of the most notorious serial killers from the 1970s. However, there was a complication. The man had already left Mexico. Although a local arrest warrant was issued, it wasn't sufficient. Authorities sought a red notice from Interpol to enhance international cooperation. The FBI and U.S. consulates joined the search, and the suspect's physical description was made public to help locate him. Experts also conducted new forensic tests to ensure that no accomplices were missed. The breakthrough in the investigation came from detailed profiling. Investigators identified the man's methods. He targeted young women who were petite, attractive, and vulnerable. He portrayed himself as polite, respectful, and generous to gain their trust and lower their defenses. Once he had their confidence, he would lure them to secluded areas where he would then attack them. Each of the 3 known victims, Elizabeth Martinez, Karen, and Angela Carolina Acosta Flores, suffered extreme violence, with visible injuries primarily to their faces and chests. His method of asphyxiation was a defining characteristic. 2 of the victims were found without clothes, while the third, although still dressed, had more injuries, indicating she may have fought back. This was not a crime of passion. It was deliberate, predatory, and systematic. Although these 3 cases gained media attention, they were not isolated. At the time of Elizabeth's disappearance, there were already rumors about other missing women with similar ages, professions, and unfortunate outcomes. Their stories have quietly faded away without resolution. As the investigation progressed, authorities were under pressure to act quickly. Although the suspect's identity remained confidential, local media labeled him as the Ted Bundy of Tijuana. His actual name was Bryant Rivera, a U.S. citizen with several known addresses in Southern California. Authorities searched these locations, but he was nowhere to be found. Family members described Bryant as working in e-commerce. Meanwhile, the Elizabeth's family was actively seeking justice for her. On February 14, 2023, marking 1 year since her murder, they revisited the site where her body was discovered and placed a floral tribute in the shape of a heart. Her brother spoke to reporters, expressing his deep sorrow and anger. A year had passed, and Bryant remained at large. The family's lawyer had been denied access to the case details, and the prosecutor's office had not provided any updates. Additionally, Elizabeth's Jeep Liberty, which was part of the crime scene, had yet to be returned. On July 6, 2023, Bryant was arrested in Los Angeles. The arrest took place calmly at his parents' home. However, he was only charged with the murder of Angela Carolina. While the murders of Karen and Elizabeth were not included in the UPC's charges, even though Mexico had made an active extradition request for all three cases. The Baja California prosecutor publicly confirmed Bryant's arrest, stating it was a result of collaboration between local and federal law enforcement agencies in the U.S. Bryant was assigned a public defender and requested bail. The judge denied the bail request, citing concerns about Bryant being a flight risk and a potential danger to women. He was ordered to remain in custody at Los Angeles County Jail. His family firmly rejected all allegations against him. His mother claimed he could never commit such acts of violence, and his sister even wrote a letter to support his character. However, the evidence suggested otherwise. On June 29, 2023, a federal judge in Los Angeles approved Mexico's request to extradite him. Family members of Angela were present at the hearing, along with the brother of Elizabeth. The courtroom was heavy with the sorrow of three grieving families. The judge emphasized that Bryant would remain in custody. As of June 2025, the extradition process is still ongoing. Legal experts estimate it could take up to 2 years to complete. If convicted of all three murders, Bryant could potentially face a total of 180 years in prison. However, due to Mexican law, the maximum sentence he could actually serve is 50 years. In addition, Mexican prosecutors have suggested that Bryant might be connected to a fourth victim, prompting them to investigate unsolved cases of missing women. Investigators are also re-examining surveillance footage from hotels and motels to determine if this predator has been active for a longer period than initially suspected. The situation surrounding Elizabeth has evolved from a personal tragedy to a representation of a larger national issue. Her death, along with the deaths of Karen and Angela, underscores the serious stigma and disregard that women in the escort industry encounter. When Elizabeth went missing, authorities did not intervene. Instead, it was her family who located her. It was her online activity, rather than official procedures, that ultimately pointed to her killer. Even now, despite an arrest, justice has not been achieved. The murder of Elizabeth Martinez Figueroa is a heartbreaking reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by women in Tijuana's nightlife and the devastating consequences of a system that too often fails them. Her vibrant spirit, her dreams of a brighter future, and her deep bond with her family were cruelly extinguished, leaving a void that echoes through her community. The cases of Elizabeth, Karen, and Angela reveal a chilling pattern of violence that demands urgent action. As Bryant Rivera's extradition process drags on, Elizabeth's family and countless others continue their relentless pursuit of justice, refusing to let her story fade into silence. This tragedy is not just a personal loss, but a rallying cry to confront the stigma, neglect, and impunity that perpetuate such crimes.
Stacy DeGrandchamp, a 17-year-old high school student from Fort Wayne, dreamed of attending Ball State University to pursue a career in computer technology. As an only child raised by a single mother, Stacy was described as confident, beautiful, and popular. However, her popularity often led to jealousy from others. On August 15, 2002, Stacy attended a party with approximately 20 people. Tragically, the night took a devastating turn when a fight broke out outside the house, leaving Stacy severely injured. She was rushed to the hospital but passed away shortly after. It took 17 years to solve the case, as witnesses were initially unwilling to come forward. In the spring of 2002, Stacy met Brandon Muff, a recent graduate of Fort Wayne High School, at a party. Brandon, who was in his early 20s, had a rebellious bad boy persona that Stacy found irresistible. She quickly fell for him and started spending time with his circle of friends. This group included girls Amanda Richards, Whitney McGee, and Holly Boisvert, who often hosted gatherings at Holly's house. Her home, which included a pool, became a popular hangout spot, as her father gave the teens free rein. While Stacy appeared to fit in with the group, her presence reignited old tensions between her and Holly. The conflict between Stacy and Holly traced back to middle school. At an 8th grade pool party at Holly's house, she had mocked and splashed Stacy in front of others, causing Stacy to leave the gathering embarrassed. Although the two seem to have made up over time, old grudges resurface when Stacy joins Holly's group of friends as Brandon's girlfriend. Holly had previously dated Brandon, and while their relationship had ended, she still had lingering feelings for him. Stacy's budding romance with Brandon upset Holly, leading to renewed friction. However, this time Stacy did not let herself be intimidated like before. By the summer of 2002, the tension between Stacy and Holly had escalated. Holly began spreading rumors about Stacy, turning others in the group against her. At the same time, Stacy's relationship with Brandon started to unravel. Realizing she was on the wrong path, Stacy made a pivotal decision just weeks before her senior year of high school. She broke up with Brandon, distanced herself from his crowd, and began focusing on her future. She cut ties with most of the group, apart from a new friend she had made that summer, Abby Oswald. Determined to turn her life around, Stacy began preparing for the college years ahead. Abby, a friend of Brandon, met Stacy through him. On August 15, 2002, they spent the day together. They decided to go to the mall, as Abby was shopping for a prom outfit. Later, Abby suggested they attend a party at Brandon's house, where he lived with his roommate, Justin. Stacy was hesitant at first, but Abby convinced her to go. Around 9:30 p.m., they arrived at the house. Shortly before 11 p.m., the Fort Wayne Police Department, along with firefighters and paramedics, responded to a 911 call from the Guthrie Street area. Earlier, in the early evening, the police were called due to complaints about loud music and a small party. However, they left without further intervention. This time, when emergency responders arrived, they found a young woman lying in the driveway, bleeding from her chest. She was rushed to a trauma center in Fort Wayne, but her injuries proved fatal. Abby later explained to detectives what had transpired. When she and Stacy arrived at the party, Brandon and a woman, Holly, were sitting together on the porch. Stacy confronted Holly, questioning her presence. The argument quickly escalated into a physical fight. They pulled each other's hair, punched, kicked, and rolled on the grass. At one point during the fight, Stacy gained the upper hand and kicked Holly in the head or face. Suddenly, Stacy appeared to lose strength and went limp. At that moment, Brandon intervened. He grabbed Stacy by her ankles and dragged her toward the trash cans. Once in the yard, she managed to stand up and stagger down the driveway, but only a few seconds later, she passed out. Brandon went to check on her, lifted her shirt, and noticed that her bra was soaked in blood. That was when they called 911. Both Holly and Brandon were taken to the police station for questioning. Forensic experts arrived at the scene and taped off the area. They began taking photos and videos of the crime scene. Since Stacy was bleeding from the chest, investigators suspected that a weapon had been used. However, no sharp objects or knives were found in the backyard or driveway. After obtaining a search warrant, detectives entered the house and seized several kitchen knives from the table. Meanwhile, at the hospital, doctors worked in the operating room to save Stacy's life. She had a stab wound to her upper chest and another to her abdomen. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to her injuries. With her death ruled a homicide, the Fort Wayne police began an official investigation. At the station, Holly provided her version of events. She claimed she had no part in Stacy's injuries, stating that they had only argued and fought. Holly denied having a knife and suggested that Stacy might have fallen onto glass in the trash can. Brandon was also interviewed, and his blood-stained shirt was collected as evidence. He claimed he had pulled Stacy by her ankles to break up the fight but didn't realize how hard he had been pulling. He also suggested that she might have been injured by broken glass from the trash can. However, Holly and Brandon's statements didn't align with the evidence. Photos of the crime scene showed no broken glass in or around the trash cans. Moreover, there was no blood near them. The coroner's report confirmed that Stacy's injuries were caused by a sharp knife blade, as they were clearly stab wounds. Nevertheless, no knife was found at the scene or on Holly and Brandon at the time. They were then released, but the investigation into Stacy's death remained ongoing. On August 19, 2002, Stacy was laid to rest, dressed in the outfit she had planned to wear for her prom photo. Her funeral was crowded, with many of her friends from parties attending: Abby, Whitney, and Amanda. Notably absent was Holly, but Brandon attended, drawing everyone's attention. His presence surprised many, as rumors were swirling at Wayne High School that he and his friends had manipulated Stacy into attending the party where Holly could confront her. This raised suspicions among investigators about whether the incident was a premeditated plot by Holly to harm Stacy. Following Stacy's death, Holly became a social outcast as most people believed she was responsible. However, another rumor implicated Whitney. A few days before Stacy's death, Whitney had left a message on Stacy's answering machine, advising her to be careful. When a detective questioned Whitney about the message, she insisted it wasn't a threat but rather a warning. Whitney claimed she knew Holly wanted to pick a fight with Stacy and hoped to prevent the two from encountering each other. While Whitney may have been trying to keep Stacy and Holly apart, Brandon seemed to do the opposite. Whitney revealed to detectives that Brandon had called Holly on August 15 and pressured her to attend the party, warning her that if she didn't come, he would never speak to her again. Investigators began considering whether he had orchestrated the situation to provoke a confrontation between Holly and Stacy. She had just broken up with Brandon, which had hurt his self-esteem. Detectives speculate that revenge, combined with Holly's jealousy, may have led to Stacy's death. Abby, Stacy's new friend, played a significant role in convincing her to attend the party. Abby encouraged Stacy to go because she was friends with Brandon. Investigators later questioned Abby's motives, wondering why she would push Stacy to attend the party at the Guthrie Street house when Holly might be there. They suspected that she could have been involved in a plan to put Stacy in harm's way. However, Abby denied any involvement and claimed that she had actually tried to stop the fight that occurred that night. The investigation eventually shifted its focus to Brandon, leading detectives to speak with his roommate, Justin. On August 26, Justin was interviewed by law enforcement and became a key witness. He stated that when he had tried to break up the fight between Stacy and Holly, Brandon had stopped him and told him to let them fight, as if Brandon had been enjoying the confrontation. He also revealed that Brandon later asked him to tell the police that Holly hadn't done anything and that Stacy had simply fallen. This statement made detectives extremely suspicious. They believed Brandon might know important details but was either too scared to share them or deliberately trying to hinder their investigation. Brandon was questioned again, but during his second interview, he refused to provide any new information. He claimed he wasn't a snitch and denied seeing Holly with a knife. Detectives were convinced that Holly was responsible for the crime, but no witnesses were willing to admit they had seen anything, and no murder weapon was ever found. Without these crucial pieces of evidence, the authorities were unable to charge or arrest anyone. As time passed, weeks, months, and eventually years, the case went cold. 17 years after Stacy's death, no one had been held accountable, and no progress had been made in solving the case. It remained unsolved, leaving everyone involved frustrated and confused. Stacy's cousin, Jamie McMillan, refused to let the case fade into obscurity. Determined to find justice, Jamie reached out to Detective Brian Martin, who specialized in unsolved cases. In March 2019, Jamie urged Detective Martin to revisit the case. She suggested interviewing Brandon, Holly, Abby, and Amanda again, hoping that, with the passage of time, the witnesses might be more willing to talk and share the truth. Everyone who had attended the party that night was now older, and perhaps they had reflected on their lives and would finally provide new information that could advance the investigation. Detective Martin begins questioning Abby, who continues to deny ever seeing the knife, just as she did 17 years ago. Next, he interviewed Brandon, who appeared deeply remorseful and admitted the incident had weighed on him for years. However, Brandon also stated that he couldn't recall seeing Holly with a knife. About a month later, Detective Martin located Holly in Wisconsin. Holly was initially hesitant to open the door, but when she eventually did, Detective Martin introduced himself and explained that he was investigating an unsolved case. Holly turned visibly pale. When the detective asked whether she remembered the party, their conversation quickly revealed some surprising details. During their discussion, Holly repeatedly referred to Stacy as her friend. Holly admitted they had been difficult teenage girls, but Stacy was still her friend. She firmly stated that she would never intentionally harm Stacy or threaten Stacy with a knife. She then admitted that she had owned a folding knife at the time and usually carried it for protection. When the detective asked if she had the knife with her during the fight with Stacy, Holly left the room and returned with the very same knife in hand. Detective Martin was shocked. He believed it could potentially be the weapon that had eluded investigators for 17 years. Back in Fort Wayne, Detective Martin began gathering additional information. Although initial test results showed that Stacy's DNA was not found on Holly's knife, the detective conducted further analysis. He later consulted Dr. Wagner, the chief pathologist on the case, who reviewed Stacy's autopsy photos. Wagner concluded that the knife was consistent with the stab wounds Stacy had suffered. On March 25, 2020, Holly, who was now 33 years old, was arrested. After years of silence, Amanda, a friend and the main witness, finally decided to speak up. She had been with Holly the night of the party and revealed that Holly had a knife with her that evening. She recalled Holly bringing the knife along when they arrived at the house and asking Amanda to hold it in her purse. Later, as she and another friend, Whitney, were preparing to leave, Holly asked for the knife back. Amanda saw nothing unusual about this and handed it over. As Amanda and Whitney were leaving, Stacy arrived at the house. Although Amanda remained silent for nearly 2 decades, her testimony could have helped the police solve the case much sooner. With Amanda's statement and additional evidence, authorities were able to reconstruct the incident leading up to Stacy's death. At the center of this tragic story was Brandon, a former graduate of Fort Wayne High School. He was the quintessential bad boy and, despite his flaws, attracted Stacy. Their relationship marked a turning point in Stacy's life, as she became involved with Brandon's social circle, a group known for their partying. Holly, who had dated Brandon before Stacy, still harbored feelings for him. Her lingering affection, coupled with Brandon's manipulative tendencies, deepened her resentment toward Stacy. He enjoyed the attention and often fostered rivalry between Holly and Stacy, which fueled his ego. This animosity came to a head on August 15, 2002. Stacy had received an invitation to a party despite her friends' concerns about its location. She chose to attend anyway. When she arrived, she found Holly with Brandon, further escalating the tension. An argument broke out and quickly turned violent. When Holly realized she was losing the fight, she stabbed Stacy twice with the knife. After years of investigation and consultation with Stacy's family, the Allen County Circuit Court offered Holly a plea bargain. She confessed to stabbing Stacy, which caused Stacy's death, and insisted that neither Brandon nor anyone else was involved. She acted alone. On January 14, 2022, Holly Boisvert was sentenced to 25 years in prison as part of the plea agreement, with 5 years suspended and 3 years of probation. Accounting for the time she has already served in credits for good behavior, she could be released as early as 2030.